Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. My goddamn phone is ringing because it's a stupid-ass solicitor wanting to sell me something. I never answer that home phone. If any of you solicitors are out there listening to the show, which is a better investment of your time than my phone ringing right now, then I would suggest that you watch or listen to our podcast, all of Conrad's podcasts. Better deal than calling my sad ass here early in the morning when you know I'm not going to answer. I will never answer that phone for any reason. God damn it, these people. There's supposed to be some system you can put in your phone that they blocks this stuff. I call bullshit on that one. But nonetheless, Conrad, to your original question, I am great. I'm having a good time this week. I'm home. I'm in Florida a lot, but I'm home now and trying to continue the grind down there in Duval County. And things are good, though. Life's good. I feel good. I'm healthy. I've got a lot to be thankful for. I'm wearing my mask. I'm getting more used to that. I'm a big mask believer. And so, you know, I got a thing the other day, an email from some fan on our JR's BBQ.com says, I loved your work, JR. I think a lot of you, but I can't follow you anymore. I'm not going to buy any more product because you sent out a tweet that said Black Lives Matter. Okay, your call. I didn't respond to it, but it was a profanity-laced email. Can you imagine somebody taking the time out of their valuable time they can never retrieve to express themselves in such a negative manner over such a sensitive and much needed slogan? I don't get it. Are you that much of a racist? God damn, you must be miserable. Whew. I don't know, man. We're living in interesting times, my friend.
You know, sometimes, Jim, I get to just turn on the microphone, click record, and let you go. And this is one of those times. I love when you're fired up first thing in the morning. This is going to be a good show. Yeah,
it's a great event. It's a great event. And one of those ones where I remember subtleties that I heretofore would normally forget because I did so many pay-per-views, you know, for years. You know, Lawler and I did a pay-per-view a month. And it just was, you can't remember all the details. You can't remember what you were wearing, whatever. That's why I enjoy the ride-alongs. We got another ride-along coming up soon. I enjoy the ride-alongs that I'm involved in because when I see what talents are wearing, the signs in the crowd, you start remembering little things that make it a fun show. So anyway, this is a real good show to talk about. It was a real good show to broadcast. And some guys really separated themselves and maximized their minutes, including, for example, the first ever TLC match we're going to talk about. Those guys had a chance to make their mark and sign their name on a match that would be all theirs. And I don't know if we all knew it to that degree at that time, but nonetheless, I love it when guys have a chance to star, to become a star, or to steal the show, whatever term or cliche you want to utilize. And I thought we had several guys on that show that did that. And I thought the creative was pretty good too. It was, you know, when you got talents involved, we had Rock involved, and you had Triple H involved. Not so much Kurt, because Kurt was just the machine, the real machine. They're so involved in their match that the creative seems to take on a different form. Same thing with Undertaker and Kane. They had a lot to say about how their match went down. And when you have active talents actively involved in their creative, the execution of said creative is normally better. And I think that's one of the things about AEW is the fact that the talents are deeply involved in their own creative. Therefore, they buy into it better. Therefore, they execute it much more succinctly and more efficiently. So it was a good example of where it's funny to compare the 2000 SummerSlam to today's AEW, but the concept of having talent involved in the creative on that night in Raleigh certainly follows suit of what we were doing every Wednesday night on TNT on AEW. So a lot of interesting parallels, good backstories, and I know you'll navigate the waters as you always do. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. SummerSlam 2000, of course, today is the actual 20-year anniversary of this show airing. As you mentioned, we're here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're coming off Fully Loaded 2000, which featured a main event of The Rock retaining his title over Chris Benoit by a dusty finish. Triple H would pin Chris Jericho, and The Undertaker would pin Kurt Angle. We've also covered Raw from the Georgia Dome on a watch-along, and now we're ready for SummerSlam 2000. We should go ahead and mention, as we wind down the month of July, we continue to see more problems on Smackdown between Triple H and Stephanie. This time, Triple H is going to bring her flowers. Seems like everything is great. And then Foley orders a mixed tag match where Trish Stratus is going to be teaming with Triple H. And you can imagine that did not go well. I got to tell you, this still ages well, this whole Triple H, Stephanie, Trish, Kurt Angle storyline. What did you think of the creative at the time that put all these pieces together?
Well, I liked it because it gave very talented people the opportunity to participate and be involved. You know, looking at all the names you just mentioned, they're all Hall of Fame level people, talents. So I enjoyed it. I thought it added a little bit of sizzle to the steak, which I always think it needs to be in proportion. That's all I'm saying. I have no issue with sizzle, meaning comedy, or things of that nature, or drama, or personal interactions. That's sizzle to me. The bell to bell is the steak for me. So we always knew that if you have any pairing of Triple H and a Kurt Angle, how can it not be great bell to bell? And they were great bell to bell. But adding the little sizzle around it, the little garnish on the plate of that great steak, was a good thing. So I was emotionally invested in the creative, without a doubt. And when that happens, you generally get a good call out of it. You get a more passionate, a more emotional call, and I think that's what people are like, and that may be missing in some companies right now is that emotional call from the broadcasters.
Well, the big twist here is when Stephanie walks in and sees Trish bent over in front of Triple H, where he's teaching her a hammerlock. She storms out. Of course, Triple H is going to have a temper tantrum too. So he's out, and now we've still got this mixed tag with Trish looking for a partner to take on Jericho and Lita. Ultimately, it becomes Benoit, and these guys start their own feud as a result here. This is good booking, in the most recent month where we looked at Fully Loaded 2000 and we were finally seeing Jericho and Benoit maybe moving up the cards and really having to test their mettle against some big names. Now we're going to see them against each other. I like this decision.
Yeah, me too. Good direction. It provided continuity. It took you from point A to point B logically. And when you can connect the dots logically, you generally have a real good chance of creating something that the fans are going to enjoy. And for my memory, all these years ago, 20 years ago, I still remember the audience being emotionally invested in these storylines at that point in time, which resulted in one of the better SummerSlams that we've ever produced.
One of the other things I wanted to bring up here is WWFE would reveal in its annual report with the SEC that the World Fund of Nature has filed a copyright infringement suit in the English High Court, seeking an injunction and unspecified damages, claiming a breach of contract dating back to a 1994 agreement that the two sides signed. Of course, we know this is going to wind up being a much bigger story in, I don't know, another 18 months or so. In general, did the chairman not seem too worried about potentially losing his name, the WWF?
I think he was more concerned. It was more of a nuisance thing in the beginning, but because I don't think anybody actually believed that any court in the world would side with the fact that it was a conflict of interest. It was a confusion in the marketplace that the WWF meant World Wrestling Federation, or did it mean World Wildlife Fund, or could it mean both, and just everybody go about their business? But that's not the idea. There was that pro wrestling bias. If it's something else, more, more smooth or less controversial, it might have been okay. But in the beginning, I think we all didn't put a lot of thought into it. Seemed like it was, like Vince said, it was like a nuisance deal, and it'll be settled. Because again, we all believe that how do you confuse saving wildlife with wrestling?
Right.
And so it just didn't make a lot of sense. Of course, the court in England, the World Wildlife Fund was on very privileged ground as far as their brand was concerned. So we didn't have a chance. Once that thing was going to be tried in England, then all of a sudden things looked bad, and it ended up bad, and costing the company millions of dollars to change everything, shirts, graphics, everything. So it was a very expensive suit, in as much as what we had to do to adhere to the judgment of the court. So it was a pain in the ass. I still think it's a pain in the ass, quite frankly. But I no longer donate to the World Wildlife Fund because I'm stubborn. I'm sure that's really affected their budgets too, by the way.
Makes the observer that there's a pretty emotional funeral service held in honor of Gordon Solie on August 5th in Tampa. It's also in the notes here that the company would send videotape tributes from Dean Malenko, Pat Patterson, and yourself. Why weren't you able to attend Gordon Solie's thing? That seems like that would be right up your alley. Yeah,
it normally would. And, I was there in spirit. It was just Conrad, the work schedule. That's simply that. I wore a lot of hats there in WWE. I had an office job. I had the old quote unquote day job, and things are sensitive time wise. If I go to a situation where I miss payroll day, that means there's a week that nobody gets a check. You can't do that. So it's just, you're obligated to do that work, and nothing I did was really more important than getting the talent paid. You think about it, what else is there? What's more important than paying your talent? They got to have grocery money. They got to pay their tabs. They got to pay for their Rolexes. So yeah, I had to work, but I was there in spirit without a doubt. And I got to send the video, which I was glad I got to do. And I have my memories with Gordon. I mean, he knew I loved him, and he was a big influence to me and all that. So, but it was sad that he left, and he left us, and he left great memories. We're talking about him now. God bless him. So, I enjoyed all my times with Gordon. I was glad that I was able to get him back into work and redeem some of his self-esteem that the management at WCW at the time didn't give two shits about, and I did. So we brought him back, and with Keith Mitchell's help, we just devised a schedule that was compatible for Gordon and his unfortunate drinking issues. We'd do things very early in the morning before he got started. Then we'd fly him home. So by flying him in the day of and then trying to do something in the afternoon, he had too many opportunities to stop at the watering hole, including the Crown Room. He'd land in Atlanta and go to the Crown Room because he was drinking free there. So when he got out of the Crown Room and he got down to CNN Center, he was already lit. So we had to change that scenario for him to protect him, so that he wouldn't lose his gig because of we couldn't control his drinking. So, but yeah, it was a tough week. I'd have loved to have been there with a lot of the Tampa guys that live there, but just wasn't in the cards. And I feel badly about that, but there's really nothing I could do about it.
Let's talk about Dwayne Johnson showing up at the Republican National Convention on August 2nd. He's going to even have a little interview segment on CNN, and they try to play gotcha and bring up that he attacked a woman earlier this week, talking about giving Trish a spine buster on TV. And, you know, he does his typical, if you don't like us, switch the channel routine, which was probably standard fare for the company at the time. This does feel like a slippery slope, though, when the company has been dodging bullets from the PTC, and now we're going to try to get out front and have a political presence. Did you have a discussion with Vince about how you know they're going to come after us if we do this type of deal?
Well, that's what you tell Vince, and he's, of course, so damn defiant. He said, well, I'll show them.
Right.
We're not going to be intimidated. That was just he's the battler. He's going to fight. But I've always said to him and anybody else that would listen that, you know, two areas for sure that we don't need to engage in creative is religion and politics. So of course Vince has a scenario where he plays God. That was distasteful and didn't go anywhere. It wasn't controversial in a good way. It was controversial, got people talking, but were they talking about the right stuff? So I think that religion and politics just don't have any place in pro wrestling creative. That's just my take on it.
Let's talk about another piece of creative here that's going to get you fired up, I'm sure. Taz comes out 18 years to the day, Meltzer would write, reprising an angle, no coincidence, he thinks, that it happened on August 7th in 82. Of course, what they're referring to is the 82 angle had Don Morocco and Gordon Solie and Roddy Piper. But now we've got new players. Taz is going to start bullying you. He's going to slap you, slap the cowboy hat off of you. Lawler comes to your defense. And magically, we've got a feud here with Lawler and Taz. What'd you think of the creative? And I mean, Taz has some pretty stiff lines, I'm sure, that were scripted for him about your Bell's palsy condition. And I don't know, where'd you land on this? What'd you think of this angle?
Didn't think much of it at all. Didn't like it. Meant nothing. Is a television angle. Was never meant to draw any money because those guys are never going to be on the top of the card with this roster. And, you know, Lawler's one of the greatest workers of all time. He's still wrestling, for God's sakes, in the 70s. So I didn't see, what's the payoff?
Right.
There was no real payoff other than we got to talk about JR's Bell's palsy so we can bring more attention to his paralyzed face and the fact that he couldn't smile. Let's underscore that because that's just good TV. That's good shit. It's not good shit. It's shit, all right. It may be the drizzling shits. That's what kind of shit it was. It wasn't a nice, well-prepared saw log. It was the drizzling shits. It was everywhere. So I didn't like it because I always felt, here's why I didn't like it. I didn't think, number one, I said this before, I didn't think I was very good in that world. And I never saw, again, what's the payoff going to be? And the thing that when you're doing that with me, you're taking time from another talent that's in the back that's waiting their opportunity to get on television. Because we got a lot of TV time out of that damn thing. And so I didn't like it. I didn't think it was in good taste. I thought it was a disgusting taste in a lot of ways. But the positive side of it was it got Taz on TV. It got Lawler in the ring. And so there's where you were with that deal. But I wasn't real high on it, Conrad. None of those angles I did I just didn't think I was very good at it again. And we're passing on others that should be that I thought were more deserving. But it was an idea they had. And, you know, one can't, as Lawler would say, one can't grieve forever. And so we have to revisit facial paralysis again. And I just thought it was a little personal and bullshit, quite frankly.
Let's talk about our main event angle. We see a bunch of vignettes from Triple H not wanting to talk to Stephanie. Eventually she's going to come out, explain that her and Kurt Angle are just friends. She's going to apologize and admit she was wrong. And in fact, say she was just jealous of Trish for getting Hunter's attention. And when Hunter comes out, the fans don't want him to forgive her. They want this to become a big spectacle. Instead, they hug and kiss. The boos pour in. And Stephanie says her only request is that Triple H will just shake Kurt's hand. And of course that brings Kurt Angle out, and Foley says, since they both won a title shot at SummerSlam, they can wrestle later in the show for a title match. Eventually they make it a 3-way with Chris Jericho. I don't know that the fans really wanted that to happen, but that's the situation. But it is pretty creative when both Kurt Angle and Triple H have pinned Jericho at the exact same time. So Meltzer would say the finish was totally flat live, but I understand how we're trying to have some connective tissue week to week here. And since both of these guys are going to wind up in a 3-way against The Rock, we've got to have a reason to make it a 3-way. I like this idea of interjecting a third party, and then they both pin him. But hey, nobody really won. Nobody really lost. We both did the same. We've got a 3-way for the main event. What'd you think of the creative to get to a 3-way? And in general, do you like 3-ways as a main event, or do you think that belongs on the undercard?
Well, it depends on who the talents are involved in it and what story is told leading up to it. I don't have a hard, fast rule that triple threat matches should not be in the main event, because I've booked a lot of them in the over the years in live events, because you had guys that stories bled over to other people's business, and in this situation is a good example of that. But the level of talent that were involved, pardon me, in this 3-way, just give you a sense that, well, this is going to be okay because all these guys can work. They're all talented. Pardon me. So I had no issues with it. I thought it worked out fine, and it moves stories along logically. And again, connecting the dots with logic is a good thing. And this was, I thought, very a logical booking.
We're going to get another great match, another great 3-way at this SummerSlam show. And we start to see the stage set when the Dudleys are going to beat Edge and Christian by DQ in a title match when Bubba uses a chair. As Edge and Christian go to leave, the Hardys come out, throw them in the ring. Devon gets a table. The Hardys get some ladders. Matt and Jeff come off a ladder onto Edge. And then Bubba powerbombs Christian off the middle ropes through a table. The stage is set for our first official TLC. Of course, there'd been some crazy matches going back to October of '99 with parts of these teams, but never have we had all three in an official TLC until SummerSlam. But you guys knew sort of what you had with what they had done at WrestleMania and then No Mercy before that. But an official TLC, I mean, this is, as far as importance in WWE history, this is right up there, is it not?
Yeah. Pardon me. Yeah, it was good. It was good. It started something that even became the name of a pay-per-view. I mean, at the time we did this show, produced this show, nobody knew the long-term future of TLC. It was brand new that very night in Raleigh. But it has led to not only a pay-per-view taking the same name, it's led to some outstanding matches subsequently going forward. So, again, all those cats maximize their minutes. And they raised the game, and because it was a brand new scenario, there was not a lot of precedent. Well, I saw this match before years ago. No, you didn't. We didn't have this match years ago. It was a brand new concept, which I think most fans like, as long as it's a good concept. And going into it, hell, we didn't have any idea how creative these cats are going to be in organizing their spots and taking the risks they took. Because it was a Joey Chitwood thrill show from the moment go. Bodies are strewn everywhere. The risks that were being taken were unprecedented. Guys leaving their feet voluntarily is always an interesting concept. Does it make sense? Or are you just doing a spot for spot's sake, just for the hell of it? But these guys delivered. And they delivered something that would be a standard bearer for years to come, and it's still a viable gimmick match, if you want to say it that way. So it was good. The art that those guys created on that canvas in Raleigh was nothing short of extraordinary.
Let's keep it moving here. I do briefly want to talk about the Taz Lawler thing because that progresses. We do see Taz hit Lawler with a headset, and Lawler, according to the Observer, juiced. Pretty remarkable that of all the people that we could position Taz with, we're positioning him with a beloved announcer. Was that the only way that we knew we could make Jerry the babyface and Taz the heel to a New York crowd, or what's the thinking here? Because it doesn't feel like, I mean, this is a guy who gave Kurt Angle his first loss and came in with this big pedigree. Now he's feuding with, absolutely no disrespect to a great Hall of Famer, but an announcer here who is a beloved figure in the hearts and minds of the WWE universe.
Yeah, the venue was challenging because Taz was born and bred New Yorker. The crowd's going to, they're going to take that as more of a positive thing than not. I think the company, Taz's debut in the Garden, where the match you alluded to, where he stopped Angle's winning streak. There were issues of that match that the administration didn't like the way Taz delivered one of his suplexes. There was a thought that he might not be as safe as he should be. Kurt didn't complain. He rarely complained about anything. But there was just that sentiment backstage that, JR hired this guy. He comes in with all this fanfare. You guys take the ball that I handed him, and he have Taz have a great debut in the Garden against one of the greatest we've ever had, a Hall of Fame guy. But there was just something missing in that match that didn't set well with Vince and some of the decision makers. So I think what they were doing, this is my take on it, I might be wrong, just trying to find something to get Taz back involved in a positive way, because I am assuming if this program had gone long term, at the end of the day, the active wrestler would defeat the part-time wrestler and full-time announcer. So I'm assuming that. But nonetheless, I think that it was just an opportunity to try to find something that Taz could do that was positive, to get him back on track. Lawler, as you said, beloved figure, still is. It was, I don't know if it was the lesser of the evils. I don't have any idea. But I was glad for both guys that they got a chance to do something. I just wish they'd left my fat ass out of it.
Let's talk a little bit about Molly Holly. She's going to make the news here because Nora Greenwald, the real life Molly Holly, who was Mona in WCW before being let go, had agreed to terms here and is expected to sign within the next week or so. Meltzer would write, she's 22 and with her gymnastics ability has a good athletic base and a pretty face. Of course, we know Molly Holly is going to go on to become a WWE Hall of Famer here. What'd you think of the future Molly Holly when you signed her? I mean, she does have a different presentation from what you guys were looking for at the time, and she was hugely successful, of course.
Yeah, she was. I knew that we were on to something good when I met with her. I think Dean Malenko facilitated a meeting with Molly and myself at a TV, and it seemed like it was in Florida, as I recall. And she was such a class act, proper. She dressed well. Her grooming was perfect. She had a great attitude. She was very polite, very professional. And the thing I thought about, because even though she was so young, she had progressed her game in the ring tremendously. So I thought that Molly's ability, and she did have a different body type. She wasn't a 10, but she was a very attractive woman, very athletic, that Molly could work with our younger talents, our younger female talents, who had the look that Vince liked and all that stuff, the good 8x10s, the big enhanced breasts, all those good things. And she was going to be able to help them and get over. I thought she had a chance to get over if she was presented with the right creative. So I knew from the minute we talked that I didn't know how good she was going to be. I didn't have that kind of crystal ball, but I did think that she was going to be a tremendous asset, and to be able to put her into the women's locker room, which could be a very unique place, let me say, that she would fit in, because you had a heart. I don't see how anybody could not like her on a personal level. So she was not a risk, not in my view. I'm glad Dean Malenko saw the same thing, and when Dean said, I got a girl I think you'd really like to look at, and she's very talented, blah, 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 that went a long way. It still goes a long way, what Dean Malenko says. He's one of our coaches in AEW, and he does a great job helping these guys with their matches when they'll listen to him. And he's a brilliant in that world. That's why guys like Jericho and others, seasoned guys, always listen to Dean and take his suggestions, or at least they'll listen to all his suggestions. But Dean's a brilliant judge of talent. So I was very relieved. I felt good about the meeting because Molly Kane, Nora came to us from Dean, and that was all I needed to hear to get the ball started.
Let's talk about another guy coming in here, Lord Steven Regal from WCW. Of course, he had a run with you guys before, tried the whole man's man deal, and well, it didn't go that well. He wound up getting released when he had some addiction issues, I think in maybe April of 99. He pops back up in WCW, but then ultimately loses like a loser leaves style match for WCW in February of 2000 and finishes up. But now we've got a heads up that he's coming back, and it's reported in the Observer that the tentative date is going to be August 28th. Of course, we know he would actually debut sometime in September. But what I found interesting in my research is not only is he coming back and getting another shot, and kudos for that, and we know it's a happy story, and he pulled the nose up, and et cetera, but even here 20 years ago, it's written, Regal and Bruce Pritchard will be scouting wrestlers soon at the UPW shows in Southern California. Has Regal always just had a crazy eye for talent? I mean, it feels like we found his niche here, scouting wrestlers 20 years ago.
Well, I can tell you this, Conrad, that Regal was always and still is one of my favorite people in wrestling. A true friend. He's a lifer. He loves wrestling, loves pro wrestling. And so he brought with him a very unique skill set, very, very fundamentally sound from the teachings that he got there in Blackpool. Started so young and working with such great stars that were in England at that time. So I always had great respect for him. He overcame a lot, and he created one of the greatest attitudes of my career from Vince, because I took him in to meet Vince, and I think it was that first go round, and he fell asleep in the meeting. So I'm sitting there across Vince is sitting there in his chair, and I'm sitting at his right, not across the table, but next to him, and all of a sudden we're talking, and I see he kicks me on the shin, and I'm thinking it's just an accident. Then he hits me a little harder, and I look up, and Regal's dozing off. He was using, and so obviously that killed my pitch. It killed Regal's opportunity at that point in time, and I had to explain. I didn't realize his addiction issues were to this extreme. They were. We got him help. That was another challenge. So I didn't want to just leave him isolated. I thought he could help us, and I was right, because look at all these years later, how many talents that he's brought to NXT that they have subsequently become stars at the NXT level or Raw or SmackDown. So I've always had great respect for him, and I still do. We don't communicate obviously as often as we used to, but when I was working in Orlando, or excuse me, Orlando at the PC, and in Tampa at Florida Championship Wrestling with Steve Kern and company. He and I we went to lunch almost every day we were there. And we exchanged ideas. I thought he's very thought provoking. He had great insights, but he had to get past the demons, and he did. He beat that deal. He's overcome all kinds of health issues. So I have tremendous respect for Darren Matthews, aka William Regal, and but he had such a good eye for talent. He was wanting to contribute, so consequently, he and Bruce had an assignment, and Bruce, he loved going to interact with Bassman. Bruce he enjoyed the scenery in Southern California and the fact that there was a lot of prospects there, and maybe we find one or two that can come help us, and we did. His name was John Cena.
It worked out.
So yeah, it worked out. He got over pretty good as a young kid. So but Regal's a great story. He's a story of success and survival, and he's become a very valued member of the WWE team. And I think Paul Levesque would say, here to that remark.
Let's talk a little bit about Steve Austin. It comes out that he's going to receive his medical clearance in late August from Dr. Youngblood, and saying that he can return to wrestling in about 8 weeks, which means most likely the October pay-per-view. How excited were you personally to get the news here? And, this is going to be a shot in the arm, and it's happening around the same time that Raw is going to be returning to TNN. I think the plan for Raw to go to TNN, or not returning, but they're leaving USA for TNN on September 25th. You got to think, man, timeline-wise, that lines up great to have our biggest star back.
Oh yeah, it was good timing. Well, I can tell you, I was happiest with the medical report. I was happiest with the fact that, Steve was going to be able to get cleared, be healthy enough to get back in the ring. He may have to modify a few things that he does. I don't think anybody's going to be power driving him, for example. But in any event, that was the best news, that his health had improved. The surgery was successful. Dr. Lloyd Youngblood was a big old strong guy had his practice there in San Antonio, and he did one of the things that if you're going to be a friend of Austin, you got to do one thing: he's got to trust you. And Steve trusted Dr. Youngblood. They bonded, they communicated well, and Dr. Youngblood and I communicated well. I talked to him regularly, first name basis type deal. So got him watching the Raw. He became kind of a half-assed fan. But a real class act. So that was big. The thing about Steve coming back and getting back in the ring and how he's going to be reintroduced and re-debut, et cetera, I didn't really have any concerns about that because it was Steve. And I say that because Steve was going to have a hand again in his creative. And so, letting him have a vote in his creative was a smart decision. And so that was, to me, that was a no-brainer. Can we get Austin over? Are you shitting me? Yeah, we can get Austin over. That type of thought. But the main news that came out of that for me was he got a clean bill of health, on as clean a bill of health as he could get under under the circumstance of the what's that called, stenosis or something? The neck, the spinal cavity or canal is smaller than it should be. Nothing they could do to fix that. But they got the bone chips and they got all these things done, and so and he knew Steve was going to work out like a crazy man to get himself back in great shape. So the main thing, Conrad, long story short here, was the fact that our man was getting healthy, and that was always the bottom line. No pun intended.
Well, and it's a big deal for him to come back, and there's a lot of moving and shaking going on in TV here. We should also mention Rupert Murdoch and his organization, News Corporation, which include the Fox network, of course, would outbid Viacom to purchase BHC Entertainment. And this is basically a $5.5 billion deal. But a lot of people are nervous. Hey, this might spell the end of the UPN network and affect its top show, Smackdown, in some form. When you hear that Rupert Murdoch is buying out the assets here, one of which will be UPN, do you think Vince is nervous about a home for Smackdown, or does he feel like he's got Viacom in his back pocket and they'll find a home for him? Well,
the Viacom thing was certainly, a nice thing to have in your back pocket. The Murdoch component, as we see now, because they paid $1 billion for the rights to SmackDown, as the story would finally end, and on Friday nights. So it was one of those deals where it could be feast or famine. If Mr. Murdoch liked it, and he wanted to own it, and he wanted to be like he was with the NFL brand, and take it the entire limit and build around it, then we're going to be in good shape. But if he didn't have a proclivity to embrace pro wrestling, then we got to keep looking. And we were always looking. But I think that the fact that the show was on a desolate network in UPN, the highest rated show there, I would say to you, Conrad, probably there are a lot of folks, and some probably will agree with this, that they only watched UPN for one show, SmackDown. So it was a unique thing. Vince loved being on network. He loved the network component, as getting off cable, and UPN allowed that to happen, and he was real big on that. That's why, we talked about our first broadcast on Smackdown, where Lawler and I did the show, and Vince was on my ass the whole show because, I wasn't explaining things well enough for him. This audience doesn't know who these people are, and I heard that incessantly, ad nauseum. So it was he had a lot of pressure on himself because Vince's goal had always been, in which he's realized, to get back on network television, a la the sporadic appearances of Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC. That was where he believed the big money was, and it reached more homes, et cetera, et cetera. Took you to a new territory, and it did, and it has. It's just the fact that, unfortunately, the SmackDown ratings on Friday nights have not been, I'm sure, what everybody wants, the network or WWE. But, you just got to get somebody hot and get a storyline that people are going to buy into. But it's not the clearance. It's not the fact they're on Fox. It's not getting the rating. It's the fact that they don't have what people want to see. And it usually is that way.
Let's talk about Big Show. Meltzer would write, the Undertaker Kane match was set up as a last minute angle on August 14th when the WWF sent Big Show home as a disciplinary measure. There are numerous reasons involved. Management believes Show is terribly out of shape, and pushing him sets a bad example for the rest of the crew. He was sent to Louisville to get back in shape and threw up in training. He worked on a house show on August 12th in Detroit and was given Benoit as a tag partner against Undertaker and Kane in the main event, with the idea that Benoit would work most of the match and he'd only have to go in for a few spots since he wasn't ready to perform, but he still blew up very quickly. He showed up the next night in Springfield, Mass., and early in the night had back spasms and couldn't wrestle in the main event, and Albert, who had already wrestled in a 6-man tag earlier in the show, was put in the match teaming with Angle against Undertaker and Kane. Where he wound up with the most tremendous heat, though, is whether or not this is real, and being wrestling, never trust anyone, is that after the show, his back spasms cleared up and he left the building just fine. He showed up the next day in Providence for Raw, and they had an angle planned for him, and then his back spasms were acting up, and the decision was made to take him off the active roster and fill in for the SummerSlam spot by doing the Undertaker Kane angle for the millionth time. There are many complaints that Show, who in many ways is a protege of Hulk Hogan, can't get away from the Hogan training and diet regimen and is obsessed with getting bigger, which is actually humorous if you think about it, which takes away from his ability to perform in the ring because he's carrying all the excess weight. With his back problems subsiding, the plan is to send him full-time for the Mark Henry treatment at OVW until his conditioning is what they would consider at acceptable levels. What do you remember about your frustrations with Big Show here?
Commitment, making a commitment to drop unneeded pounds. Pro wrestling's a funny business, Conrad. We can say that, and Andre's a great example for this. Over the years, Andre has had a variety of heights. He's had a variety of weights, and people would believe it as a rule. So I think we could say that Big Show was 7 feet tall. He weighed 500 pounds. And how are you going to dispute it? We didn't put him on scales.
Right.
So he didn't need the weight. And the fact that Paul played basketball at a high level, actually, he was very highly recruited out of high school. He was a decent athlete and a good man. He just didn't have growing up in the South, Conrad, and you and I can identify with this probably better than a lot of people. Growing up in the South, we can develop poor eating habits. Fried chicken, fried potatoes, it's deep fried this and whatever. We got to have dessert. I need something sweet. No, you don't. So I think the commitment for him to get into top game shape was something that I was looking to see. And I recruited Paul. I went, Jerry Briscoe and I recruited him. He was living in Tampa. So, and I like him. I still like him, but he's got himself in a lot better shape. He's doing well with this Netflix show. Seems like I hear people talking about it. I've watched it. It's funny. It's a little sitcom. So the commitment to get into shape He needed to do that not only for his own health and his own performance level. Paul needed to do that to show the locker room, hey, I'm committed. I'm going to get in great shape. I'm going to be a bigger asset to the company. I'm going to help all of us make more money. And that's what we were waiting for the switch to be flipped. So that was my issue there. And he just, he was surrounded by thoroughbreds. And so to keep up, you got to get along or you got to move along. And bottom line is that we were just concerned about his commitment to the business. He was making an awful lot of money, and that's good. So it wasn't a pay issue that was keeping him back. It was just his attitude about getting into great shape. And, we can't have you working only big man spots and 5-minute matches. That's not going to get it done. So that was kind of what we were waiting on. And, eventually he came around to that, but it took some soul searching moments and conversations to get that program started.
Talk to me about the back spasms incident. We've often heard in wrestling where guys, especially in the WCW era, it felt like they were, playing up their injuries a little bit to get out of work, or at least that's the perception a lot of fans and a lot of newsletter guys had. You don't really hear that attitude much in the WWF. It feels like a totally different vibe in the locker room and from management. But this is pretty much implying, hey, his back only hurts when he has to work, but he's fine as soon as the show's over. Now, that's probably not fair, but I do want to know what you remember about this incident specifically back in the day.
I think he had stress. I think he knew that he was not in great shape. I think he knew that he was going to be exposed. And I think that psychologically it wore on him. And so I think the back spasms are real. I just don't know exactly, I'm not Dr. Phil to tell you exactly why they were triggered. But I can see where he was very self-conscious about being in such poor shape. The thing about that, he's so damn big, so strong, that you have to have a talent like that be extra careful with who they're dancing with. The idea is to get in and get out without killing somebody and hurting somebody. So, that was how I looked at that deal. I'd like to think that he wasn't faking the back spasms. I don't want to believe that. I'm not going to believe that or endorse that theory. But I do think that the back spasms are there. It's just the point I would say is what caused these back spasms. Was it psychological? Could be. It could be, and very well could be. And so, but I don't. That's where you get close to a talent. You want to believe in them, and you just don't believe that somebody would have this kind of opportunity to and earn the money that he's earned and was earning. He was making $1 million a year and more. So I think that I just think that it was a psychological issue there. He had a block. It's like a golfer going into a situation where he can't hit the greens. He can't putt or whatever. It was a crazy fucking thing. So in any event, I never wanted to believe that Paul was faking it. I really didn't. So I think it was a psychological deal, but he believed he had back spasms. I believe that they existed. It's just the point is, what was the reason for the back spasm? Was the fact that he was pushing himself too hard? Did he have a back problem? What it was? I don't know. But we knew that we had to fix it, and one way to fix it was the simplest way was get some of those excess pounds off of him, up to 100 pounds. We thought that he was, he could lose 75 or 100 pounds and be just fine. But that's a whole hell of a lot easier said than done. And two guys like me and you that like to eat saying, well, Conrad, you and JR need to lose about 100. Well, that's okay. What? I don't think I can do that. So that's where I was with him. He had too big an upside to give up on. So we had to do everything that we thought we could do to get him back on track. And that's exactly what we did. And to his credit, he went to OVW and did what he needed to do. I don't think he liked it down there, but how do you come off Monday Night Raw and then go to OVW? It's a little different ball game. So that's how I look at that deal. I always have belief in the talent. I was a talent-oriented guy, and I just wanted to get him. He would help our company to get him back in the lineup. How do we get him back in the lineup? Well, the first thing we need to do is get him in great shape. To get him in great shape, he needed to lose some pounds. So that's kind of where, that was the simplest way of explaining it to you.
Let's talk about another angle here with the Acolytes and En Tai skit. This goes on August 14th. The gist is the Acolytes are going to take out En Tai for a little drinking. And it's written in the Observer, quote, "The little Japanese children-like characters couldn't handle their liquor and got rude and obnoxious. And eventually Funaki threw up on Bradshaw and they beat him up. Totally racist segment on many levels." I got to tell you, and maybe my sensitivity just wasn't where it needed to be at the time. At the time, I didn't think of this as racist. I thought it was based on body weight, not necessarily ethnic makeup.
Yeah.
Did you consider this, angle to be racist?
I did not. Meltzer has a strong affinity for Japanese wrestling. He's almost sometimes, I'm sure if you've read his Observer, and I have for over 30 years, you could tell some of the things he writes about New Japan, for example, when All Japan was really rolling good. He's very partial to those brands. That's just, I'm willing to say that probably are his favorite styles of wrestling came from the Japanese. So Dave will have a different perspective of the Japanese culture than would I, for example. But at no point along with this deal, I thought it was a comedy skit. Simple as that. And the Acolytes, JBL and Ron, just were having fun drinking with these guys, and it showed a little different side of En Tai. This other than just little guys that could do great high spots and aerial stuff. So no, I never did think it was. And when I read these notes that we're talking about today, that popped up real strong to me. I said, I don't see that. I didn't. And maybe, hey, look, I both could be wrong, but quite frankly, I didn't feel that way then, and I don't feel that way now.
Let's talk about another rather controversial thing that's happening at the time. RTC are going to beat Lita in the Hardys when Godfather would pin Lita after a shoulder breaker. Somewhere in the match, Stevie Richards would also super kick Lita. Is there too much man on woman violence in this era? I mean, obviously this is, something that was happening in ECW and WCW. The WWE is not alone, but it feels like these days intergender wrestling is more of a hot topic and people are feeling really strongly one way or another, but it was happening here 20 years ago. You saw some of this stuff again for the first time in 20 years. What'd you think of the guys working with Lita here?
Too much aggression. I don't know if it's violence. Violence is a strong word. Certainly aggression is a little bit more tasteful, perhaps. I thought it was too much. I'm not a fan of intergender wrestling. As not everybody, but most people that listen to this show are aware, it's not my favorite thing. So I'm not going to indict everybody, well, what about Tessa Blanchard? She wrestled men in Impact. Okay. Well, that's what Impact wanted to do. That don't mean I have to like it. That's what they wanted to do, and they had the power to do what they wanted to do. I just didn't think it. I thought it was illogical. I thought it was illogical when we had China doing it, but she didn't want to wrestle women, and she had influence in the office, and Vince was willing to go along with it. I thought it was silly. It's just unbelievable, in my view. So, but I wasn't a big fan of it. The physicality at times I get. But come on, man. It's I just thought it was a little too much, quite frankly, just too much.
Let's talk about the other piece of business here that goes awry during a taping. Kane's going to come in and do an angle choke slamming the Undertaker through the ring. The ring didn't break the first time, so they have to do it again. When you're doing this in front of a live audience and you have a stunt plan and it doesn't go well, does panic set in? I mean, what's the feeling when you're under the headset, under the black hat, and this is happening in real time, and well, that can't be according to plan, and they have to redo the same spot?
The good news about me and Lawler is that the less we knew, the better off we thought we were. The less we knew about something that was planned. I knew there was going to be some sort of a stunt. Wasn't exactly sure how it was going to be executed, but they got a stunt planned. Okay. That's all I really needed to know. So when it didn't come off the first time, I wasn't totally shocked because I didn't know what they were going to do to begin with. To my own encouragement, I didn't need to know, didn't want to know. Lawler, the same thing. So you know, I just, well, these fucking text messages. These some of us not know, Conrad. I'm recording a podcast right now with you.
One of the biggest podcasts in the world. I mean, you're blowing up over there. You're super popular.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, everybody that's texting me wants something. Hey, would you do this? Would you do a free interview for this A&E special? Would you do this for free? Jesus Christ, what am I, Mother Teresa? I'm not a charity case here. Come on. But anyway, it's another case. I sound like I'm a for profit only type guy. By the way, I probably am. I thought that, so I didn't go crazy with it. And knowing who was in the ring, that they would get it right. So, and they did. So it was just one of those things where if I had known more detail, it probably would have affected my mindset, Conrad, but it didn't affect my mindset because I wasn't sure where we were headed. So didn't go crazy with it. It didn't bother me too much. And sometimes those issues go awry. We started doing a lot of stunts in that era, a little bit too much, I think, at times, looking back on it. And you know, I didn't know you needed stunts to get a match like Undertaker and Kane over, even though the match had happened a lot of times. It still made sense. And two big attractions, super heavyweight guys, 300 pounds, you know, in close to that 7-foot range, 6'8", 6'9". You know, they don't need whistles and bells. They just need to be turned loose and beat the shit out of each other. And people, I think, would have been happy. But nonetheless, that's kind of the scenario that we saw.
Another segment here on TV that sort of advances your storyline. Taz is going to choke out Crash quickly, and then Taz makes off with your hat and shoves you down. Of course, Lawler makes the save to a big pop. Hopefully this doesn't happen in AEW anytime soon. Chat me up though.
Let me give you an example. It ain't going to happen in AEW soon or later. That ship has sailed. There's no fucking way that JR is going to get involved physically in another wrestling angle. We have talents that need to get over. I do not need to get over. I'm not going to get in the ring under no circumstance. And that may sound like, oh, JR's being a dick. I'm 68 years old. Let's be realistic here. You know, I'm not going to get in there and have a health issue or something like that. Because the stress for me to get in the ring was the most intense stress that I have ever encountered in my life in pro wrestling. Because again, I wasn't good at it. I didn't think I could run the plays that the guys wanted to run. And everybody I got in the ring with had to dumb down their game to accommodate me. I didn't think that was right. I'm happy to pass on the TV time, but there'll never be a situation. Tony Khan's too smart, and our focus is on getting talents over in AEW, not announcers. And I appreciate that philosophy from the boss.
The whole sealing JR's hat thing. This feels like something that Vince McMahon would have loved. I mean, we know this is the same guy who once, there was the whole thing with the Macho Man and Bret Hart, and stealing a part of someone's sort of signature outfit. It's got to be something Vince is enamored with. Were you surprised it took this long for the black hat to come into play? I mean, here we are in 2000. You've been rocking that thing for years by this point.
No, it was the old ribbing on the square deal, you know. So if you said something about it, it was just, oh, JR, you just don't get it. It's all off the name of entertainment. And, well, who's entertained by it? You? And maybe that's all it took. Maybe we were entertaining an audience of one. Because my sense of it was that the most of our audience, from based on what I saw, you know, you get a nice pop and Lawler makes his comeback, or he intervenes, or he comes to good old JR's rescue. But you know, come on, it was not a mass appeal angle. I think it had some personal overtures because, to be honest with you, I don't know that after the Garden at the Royal Rumble when Taz debuted, as we talked about here, that there was any significant plans to utilize him in the ring. So if you don't have long-term plans for somebody and you're doing this angle, So what is the motive for the angle? Well, we can use JR and his popularity to get us a number, a minute by minute number, and it worked. Well, I got good ratings, but it could have been somebody else getting those good ratings. Well, it shouldn't have been me. So, in any event, that ship has sailed. It should never have left the shore, quite frankly. But nonetheless, that will not happen again at AEW. And again, it's just not. It makes no sense. It's irrelevant to me. I can learn to leg slap. I can deliver about a zillion super kicks. No, I'm kidding. I'm being facetious and a dick. But no, it ain't going to happen there.
Dave Hebner undergoes an angioplasty to clear up blockages in 3 arteries leading to his heart. Apparently, he suffered a mild heart attack at Madison Square Garden on August 7th, and that's what triggered all of this. Of course, most of our listeners remember that Earl was the referee for the company, but Dave is a road agent, identical twin working backstage. What do you remember about Dave's close call here at Madison Square Garden?
It scared the hell out of me. It really did. I thought that you never know how somebody's going to come out on the other side of those things. So it was, he was lucky he got medical care quickly, and they addressed his issues, and he had all those blockages. I think that the one thing that I will compliment WWE on nowadays, it seems like anyway, they have a better handle on the medical side of their talent than we did in 2000. And, so in other words, if we had been doing more extensive testing, physicals, blood work, et cetera, that issue would have been discovered and could have been corrected before it became a heart attack. So I'll tip my hat to them for that, for sure. But it was a scary moment. Again, Hebner's no Southern boy. He ain't been eating good his whole life. So, cholesterol issues and the diet and all these things. And I'm really sensitive about that stuff. I've had 2 grandparents die of heart attacks, and I'm very cautious about that stuff. So I'm very religiously get my medical stuff done annually, and cardiologist, stress tests, all those things, because I want to live longer. And I know that I have some issues there hereditarily. But Dave, he pulled through, and luckily he pulled through. But he was a valuable member of our team, because he was one of the more reliable guys. If you give him something to do, or be sure this gets done, or tell this guy to do this, or whatever, he was always good about following up and doing a good job. So we didn't want to lose anybody for any reason, especially somebody that was as valuable as Dave Hebner was off camera.
Let's also talk about the rise of another fellow behind the scenes. Brian Gewirtz, as Michael Hayes would say, is going to make an appearance in The Observer for the first time, or at least his name does. When Meltzer writes, Brian Gewirtz is the name of the writer who deserves a lot of the credit for scripting of the Triple H, Kurt Angle, Stephanie segments. I think this is the first time he got any kind of mention in The Observer, and we know that he's going to have some of the best storylines and some of the best writing that the company ever saw. What was he like back here 20 years ago before he was The Rock's right-hand man, so to speak?
Well, obviously, Brian had great talent, still does. For an old school guy like me, some of Brian's ideas were not conventional, and they took a little bit of getting used to. Because you as a broadcaster, you need to understand the genesis of an idea to start with, so that you are better able to bring it forward verbally. And but he was always good about explaining when I had a question. And sometimes, and to Brian's defense, I could be a prick there. If I didn't like something, instead of just asking why, or what do I need, what am I missing here, I'd cut a promo, and I would be a little crass, to be honest with you. And I've apologized to Brian many times since that time. I wasn't the guy that I should be in that regard, because I didn't understand somebody thinking differently than me, which is nothing but ego. So that was my fault. But Brian's extremely talented. My God, the things he wrote in the time he was there. If you went back and earmarked everything he wrote that we would remember and liked, and thought was funny, entertaining, whatever it may be, it'd be an amazing list. So Brian was a great asset for WWE, and he was smart. He was very up on pop culture. He comes from a writing family. You know, his uncle Howard Gewirtz was a very accomplished, maybe still is, writer in Hollywood. So Brian was a great asset for us. I wish I had been a better person in the beginning of his relationship there. But you know, Michael Hayes did enough to make his life miserable because they seemed to have butt heads, and maybe it was part work and part shoot. Hell, who knows? But I should have been better to Brian. And but now we're great, and I'm a big fan of his work and what he's doing for Dwayne, and you know, so good guy. He was a good guy. He was misunderstood, and I didn't go the extra mile to understand him. I subsequently did, and as sitting here today, I really appreciate his work and the great things he did for the company and for the talent. He was a real key member of what we did.
Let's talk about somebody else who's coming in and going to make a big impact. It's Brock Lesnar. Meltzer would write, the 2000 NCAA heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar became the third NCAA champion to debut under the auspices of the WWF on August 13th at the Ohio Valley Wrestling Show in Louisville before 60 fans. Lesnar, who had only been in camp less than 2 weeks before being put in the ring, which is awfully fast for someone under Cornette's tutelage, and was said to look very good in his debut against BJ Payne. Man, this has to be something that you were thrilled to see. Of course, when we say the third former member of the NCAA championship hallways to come through the WWE, we've got Kurt Angle and Sylvester Terkay on the list, but Brock Lesnar feels like, man, this is a horse of a different color, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was that big, Charlet or Hereford bull. Herefords are red-bodied and white-faced. In some farms they call them white faces, but they're Hereford, and that's what he reminded me of, a big Hereford bull. That red tint, you know, he's kind of that blonde hair. He got a little red thing going on, and complexion-wise, and he was, you know, he was everything. If you designed a wrestler in a laboratory, that's what you get out of this. That's at the end of the conveyor belt. He's there. So yeah, it was a pretty cool deal. I never was Meltzer wrong about the fact that he was being put in the ring in 2 weeks? Probably not, but he wasn't given more than he could handle.
Right.
Everything was very basic, but he needed to get his way around the ring. And again, you got a scenario that we alluded to with Big Show earlier. You get a talent that big and strong, you got to make sure they don't hurt anybody, including themselves. So he did simple things moving along. Plus, I thought we kept him very humble. He drove the ring truck. He was the foreman of the ring crew, because all those years living on the farm there in South Dakota, you know, he was driving tractors and all kinds of farm equipment and so forth. And they gave him responsibility, more importantly. He didn't get that job because he knew how to drive a truck and pull a trailer, even though that helped. He did the job because we thought it would be great responsibility for him to take ownership of at a very young age, where he had been kind of coddled as this big stud in high school, junior college, Division I at Minnesota. You know, we thought that would be a good positive step to help him stay humble and understand what his commitment was and how important it was to fulfill your commitments. So there was a reason behind the Lesnar ring crew thing. It wasn't punishment by any stretch of the imagination. So, but we knew he was going to be extraordinary. And when we got him to Louisville with Shelton, they came together, Shelton Benjamin, who's now finally getting a little break after all these years in WWE, it seems like. You know, he took to it like a fish to water. There was not a drill he couldn't do better than anybody else. And when he saw him work and move around, it was amazing. A guy that was, 275, 280, that was doing shooting star presses until we shut that shit down. And of course, that was almost the end of his career when we erroneously allowed him to do the shooting star press at the WrestleMania 19 in the main event with Kurt Angle. So, there was nothing in his mind's eye, Conrad, that Brock Lesnar thought he could not do. If another wrestler can do something, he can do it better. And that was just the competitive nature of him. And that was one of the great things about recruiting athletes from a mainstream sport and out of a mainstream sports locker room, is that the competitive edge for Brock was always what it was. I'm going to be better than everybody else, because he knew if he was better than everybody else, the one thing that Brock looked for in the job when we hired him was money. So that was his motivation. He wasn't a lifelong wrestling fan. He found a job that he could do using his physical skills, but he knew that was the path to big paydays. And as it looks like to me, that worked out pretty accurately.
Let's keep it moving here and talk about the Raw from August 21st. There's a hardcore title match here with Shane versus Blackman, but it ends up with Test, Albert, Edge, and Christian all attacking and laying out Blackman. Shane finally comes in and scores the pin with a kendo stick to the head. Foley then rules that Shane would have to defend this title at SummerSlam against Blackman. Of course, Shane gets so scared he wants to lay down and let Edge and Christian have the belts and have one of them cover him. Foley would count to 2 and then said, "Never mind, I'm waiving the 24/7 rule until after the pay-per-view." I got to tell you, this is a fun gimmick. I mean, it does cheapen the title, but obviously it's not like this is a title that's held in high regard. But this is a fun little bit. Hey, nope, not letting you chicken shit heel get out of this. You got to get your comeuppance at the pay-per-view. The hardcore title was never supposed to be taken seriously, at least in my mind. It's all just filler, is it not?
Yeah, pretty much. Let Me Up segment. We're going to talk about another major Let Me Up segment here momentarily, but yeah, that was the scenario. It was a way to somewhat logically get unutilized talents involved in a storyline, and that's how I always perceived it. It got a lot of guys that were working their ass off, that were reliable talents, that were doing everything that they could. They're in shape. They're working hard night in and night out. It gave them the opportunity to get in the lineup, to get on television in a somewhat viable way. So again, the opportunity to maximize those minutes. So I had no issue with it. No, nobody ever thought it was going to be this is going to be the new hot title. It was a vessel to carry talents to another destination. And that destination was one of recognition and awareness. And so I thought that for what the title was for, it accomplished those things. It got a lot of guys in the game that heretofore were sitting and catering.
We also have another Let Me Up segment, as you would say. Terry's going to attack Kat at WWF New York and give her the stink face. We know this is going to set up a stink face thong match at SummerSlam. Jim, what's your favorite stink face thong match in WWE history?
That'd probably be right up there. I don't know, man. It was designed. It wasn't designed to be Funk and Briscoe.
Right.
It wasn't designed to be Bret Hart and Stone Cold. It was designed to let the audience up and put a little bit of comedic relief in there, a little titillating, a little TNA, if you will, and nothing overly serious. But these ladies, I admire their courage. They were wearing thongs and these bikini gimmicks, whatever, and they did what they needed to do to carry out their marching orders. But it was comedy. It was comedy, and then when you get into a situation, well, that match had -8 stars. No shit, really? Yeah, I realize it's not a main event from the New Japan card. It just didn't. It wasn't Tanahashi and Okada. Everything ain't Tanahashi and Okada. But these ladies did what they needed to do to make it work, and I thought they succeeded. It was what we looked for in that deal. It was sex appeal, a little comedic relief, a little voyeurism, and they did short work, but they did it.
Let's talk about another segment here where we announce a couple of matches. On Raw, we would see Edge and Christian go to a no contest with Road Dogg and X-Pac when the Dudleys came in. And during the match, they announced that Road Dogg and X-Pac are going to take on each other at SummerSlam. And then a few minutes later, after the match, the two start arguing. X-Pac headbutts Road Dogg, who falls backwards through a table. X-Pac seems remorseful at what he's done. And Meltzer would say, wouldn't it have made more sense to do the angle and then announce the match later? Because this all came off too forced and contrived.
The answer is yes. Yes, it would have been better. We got ahead of ourselves there, I think. But again, the bottom line is that if you get to SummerSlam and you get X-Pac and Road Dogg, you pretty well know that you're going to get a good performance. Both those guys are very, very talented, very, very hungry. They're making good money, and they want to continue to make good money for the foreseeable future. So, but it was asked backwards on how you'd have the angle, then you announce the match, and how that's hard to fathom is beyond me.
Next up, we've got Lita beating Stephanie to win the women's title. They go 5 minutes and 6 seconds, and Meltzer would write, which meant the fact Lita is only doing high spots and Stephanie has no business wrestling on TV was all being shoved down everyone's throat. Stephanie, to her credit, tried to do high spots and once nearly killed herself going over on a Hurricane Rana by Lita. Triple H and Angle and the Hardys were all at ringside. Angle tried to interfere, but Rock took care of him. Triple H comes in after the Rock. Angle does a run in with the belt to hit the Rock, who moves, so he hits Angle. Rock then lays out Triple H and Angle, and then gives Stephanie a spine buster to allow Lita to score the pin after a moonsault, which got a pretty big pop. Lita's probably the hottest she's ever been in her career right here. I mean, an unbelievable push for her to be in this spot, but Stephanie's not even a wrestler, but yet everyone's over. This is make sense booking, but it shouldn't make sense, but somehow in execution, it did. What'd you think?
Well, as we said before in the show, and it made some internet news sites that, JR said that Stephanie was one of the best heels of that era, and I still believe that. She had natural heat because of who she was and what she represented. She didn't have natural heat because she was really good at taking a Hurricane Rana. Her personality is what drove that character. And so to me, she did a great job with limited training and skill set at that point in time in protecting herself and who the person she was working with. Lita had this, it still does in my view. She had this really unique sex appeal aura about her. She had the big tattoo on her arm that was kind of unique in that era. It's commonplace today. It's like the boys, they're wetting their hair and coming out with their hair all wet, and then they got tats everywhere in the world, and everybody, they don't understand why they can't separate from the pack because you look like everybody else. Can you be different? And but Lita had a different look, different presentation. She didn't flaunt her body. She wore long pants. She had the breast augmentation, which didn't hurt her. The great face, beautiful woman, high cheekbones. She's very photographic. And I thought that when I first met with her in my office. I can't remember who sent her to me. Somebody said, you want to talk to this girl? But she'd come out of training in Mexico and living in Mexico, learning to speak Spanish. Here's a woman that is by herself in a country that has had some issues with crime and violence and so forth and so on, like America as well. But I'm not knocking Mexico for that. But she had everything. Uniquely beautiful was Lita, and she was very athletic, and there wasn't anything that she was afraid to try. And so sometimes that was ill-advised because she'd try anything. But she was a big star in the making. She was getting hot right in that area, she pointed out. So, and she became, along with Trish, they were the two women that really got the break in the creative, where they were getting, a very valuable TV minutes. And to her credit, Lita's credit, and Trish for that matter, they took advantage of that opportunity.
Well, let's get to our go home episode of Smackdown as we march towards SummerSlam 2000. They're going to do a parking lot angle with you, Taz, and Lawler. Taz is going to spray 13 on Lawler's car, and then he's going to have you trapped in your car and smash out the windows with a pipe. Of course, you're covered in blood. Lawler and Taz fight. At this point, you've got to be in the Hall of Fame for the ring announcer who gets the most color in wrestling. Do you know it?
I guess. I'm sure somebody back there enjoyed me bleeding. The thing about that deal was we didn't rehearse that scene. And so then when the glass broke, I got multiple pieces of glass shards in my eye. I was taken to the hospital after that.
Oh, wow.
To get the glass taken out of my eye. And I was luckier than shit that I didn't have vision issues. I was very, very lucky. So, but we didn't, who knew? I was trying to cover up. They had a blanket in there, so they're going to cut away, but the glass just went everywhere. And either I didn't cover up quickly enough I didn't want to ruin the shot. I didn't want to have to do this shit over again. So I hung in the saddle a little longer than I probably should have. And then I was taken to the hospital where in the emergency room, and they took the little shards of glass in and around my eye out. And again, luckily no damage, but things like that are why do we do this? Why am I involved in this horse shit? Well, we know why. Vince liked it. And of course, those around Vince, just like they are today, if Vince likes it, that's the only reason you need to do it. Vince likes it. It may be the shits. It may be what you would not do, but you're powerless because what he wants to do is what it's done. End of story.
Let's get to another great angle here. The main event of this show is Rock and Lita against Stephanie in either Triple H or Angle. She can't decide who her partner will be, so she flips a coin and Kurt Angle wins. Stephanie was then knocked out on the steps. Triple H comes out and carries her off. Triple H later would attack Rock, and Rock would knock out the ref for a DQ. Angle and Triple H surround Lita, but the Hardys come out and attack them. Rock then makes a comeback on Angle and Triple H. Angle walks off from Rock, leaving Triple H with Lita, Hardys, and Rock. Rock gives him a rock bottom and a people's elbow. Angle and Stephanie kiss for about 10 seconds, and then Stephanie acts shocked. What an angle, though. This lovers' quarrel and this web continues to be woven here as we march towards the big pay-per-view. Of course, the backstory again, this all started when Stephanie is suspicious of Trish and Triple H. And now Stephanie finds herself in a lip lock with Kurt Angle. As silly as it may be, it's good storytelling that makes logical sense as it progresses, does it not?
Yeah, everybody can identify with, issues with a significant other. And that's kind of what we had there. It was identifiable, it was understandable. And again, I thought it was really cool with Stephanie just pulled off her role amazingly well. So she was just this goddamn iPad. It comes on at the most fucking inopportune time to ask me Siri or whatever she is. I didn't know I had that, and now, son of a bitch, I hate technology sometimes.
Well, it loves you.
I really do, Conrad. But anyway, here's the other thing that we don't talk about. We haven't talked about. Look at the rubs, plural, that The Rock was handing out.
Yeah.
You got the Hardys who were not over to the degree they became over, getting that rub with The Rock. That didn't hurt them one iota. And then Triple H involved, another guy that was a big megastar. So all these people that were involved in the story that we're talking about right now got positive rub, and it made them more valuable. It made them more viable. It made them help make them the stars that they would eventually become. So there's another really unique aspect of this scenario that goes oftentimes unspoken, but it was a way to elevate all these different people in a very creative way by having them involved in the storyline with viable parts, with viable roles. And so it was just well booked. It was well booked from the get-go. And again, you got Triple H, who his creative was all over this thing, and Rock's creative all over this thing, Kurt to some degree as well. But Triple H and The Rock having a big hand in the laying out of the scenario, the angle, the storyline, was, I think, the component that made it really successful. They believed in what they were doing. They had a hand in their creative, and the last thing that they wanted to have happen was their portions of the creative to fail, and that did not happen.
Raw was being moved to the 11 o'clock time slot for August 28th and September 4th due to the U.S. Open coverage on the USA Network, which I know has always been a pet peeve of the company. But the day after a big pay-per-view like SummerSlam to be moved back like that, that's got to be something that really sticks in Vince's craw, does it not?
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. We've experienced some of that, some of those challenges with AEW on TNT during the NBA season. You got to find us now a little bit more effort. We're going to, but it's anytime you're moved off your spot, you force the audience to track you down. And some people won't go to the effort. Now the diehards will, but some people just will not go to the effort to find you. So it's anytime you move off your spot, it's not good news, and there's no good time for it. But doing it the day after a major show is really especially devastating.
Austin makes a surprise appearance with Deborah and yourself at WWF New York on the Thursday before this big pay-per-view. And Meltzer would note, Austin and Deborah are scheduled to be married over the next few weeks. How excited was Austin just to be around wrestling fans again? And, he's been rehabbing like a madman, but probably in almost solitary like confinement. And now to be amongst his people and to be such a big star, because he is the biggest star in the business and really a pop culture icon already here by 2000. Was he excited just to be back in that atmosphere, if you will?
Oh, hell yeah, no doubt. He's that's his life. It was his life, and he was very one-dimensional. Steve had, now he's certainly diversified. He's an entrepreneur. He produces, his stuff on USA. This little comeback when the virus eases a little bit, I'm told, and he's got very diversified in what he does, and his relationship with WWE has been somewhat renewed, which is cool. And so, yeah, he was back in his element. Conrad's like saying, you haven't been to an Alabama game in a year, and you have to go back and watch one. I hope you do this year, by the way.
Me too.
But you're home.
Right.
You're comfortable there. That's it's part of your life. And for Steve, it could be a blessing or a curse when one thing in your life is most of your life. We all have to become more diversified. And, Steve's got a great marriage now, and he's happy, and all those things that you want your friends to have: happiness, success. He was always good about saving his money, and he made a lot of money. So, I remember one quarter I told this story. It's amazing to me. He got $1 million royalty check.
Yeah.
T-shirts. It's just amazing. And he designed most of them. So he really took a interest. He was very invested in his TV persona and his career. So having him back was awesome. And Jan and I actually went to that wedding. So Jan and I went to the wedding of Steve and Deborah out there in Vegas. And because I remember in the height of all this stuff, he and I were playing blackjack. I don't know if the wives were crazy about that idea, but go shop. Go spend some money. We're playing blackjack. And so little things you remember about stuff like that. But they got married, and there's still some pictures around here at the house someplace of Jan and Deborah and Steve and myself there. So it seemed like a real happy time for him. Marrying the lovely Deborah, getting his health back, getting ready to relaunch the second part of his career in WWE, it seemed to me like everything was really headed in the right direction.
Let's talk about the show. SummerSlam 2000. We're finally here. Meltzer would start the newsletter by writing, as the bar raises once again, the question becomes, when does the bar hit the breaking point? But the match that stole the show was the tables, ladders, and chairs match with Christian and Edge, the Dudleys, and the Hardys. There were numerous spectacular bumps taken from the top of the ladders, both in the ring and over the top through tables. Although everyone involved was probably plenty sore the next morning, nobody was seriously hurt. Earlier in the show, Shane McMahon did a spectacular looking stunt bump, falling backwards some 30 feet into what was apparently a very safe crash pad in a garbage bin. It's already a given that not just independent wrestlers who imitate what they see in the big time, but kids in their backyard are going to imitate what the WWF does. Did you guys ever consider that? I mean, I know that this is something that, local news would certainly tag on you guys about, but the idea that, hey man, kids are going to start doing this. And we know that the whole disclaimer, kids don't try this at home, would start airing before all the programming. But did you worry when you're doing some of these spectacular bumps, people falling off 20-foot ladders and 30 feet off of the Titantron and all that, oh man, this could have some impressionable folks here doing some pretty silly things in real life?
Of course, you always think about things like that. I thought the first priority for me was thinking about how do we protect our talent.
Right.
They're going to be doing some extraordinary things that haven't been done before. So there's no test runs. You don't go out there, you don't walk through that match and take the bumps in the middle of the afternoon just to see how it's going to feel. That's senseless. It didn't happen. But I'm sure that more responsible people were thinking about, well, maybe it's going to adversely affect children. I did not. That was not my conviction at that point in time. I was a lot more concerned about the 6 guys in that TLC match than I was the public perception. But that's Meltzer's job to bring things like that up, which is probably a good thing to have a little watchdog type scenario. But the bottom line was that for me, I was more concerned about the talent than the message that doing TLC spots were going to was going to mean to children. The backyard wrestlers, the independent guys that were seeing these things, copycat stuff. Conrad, that's still alive today. It's still alive today. When guys are in the same profession and they see something that they perceive as working well, then why can't I do that? I think I can make that move my own and to some extent. And generally, and unfortunately, it generally means raising the bar and trying something that's a little bit too risky. And then all of a sudden, instead of these major crashes and bumps becoming a part of a finish, they're nothing more than a high spot. They mean nothing. Ooh, wow. And then the guys are up, and they're right up. So they're going. They don't sell it to any degree, at least in today's world. I've never seen anybody win a match by jumping over the top rope to a pile of waiting talents to catch them. Never. And when it first happened, it was new, it was unique, and it was, I'm like everybody else, I'm a fan. Wow, that's some crazy shit right there. But at the end of the day, when you see it week after week in various TV shows and promotions and clips on social media, et cetera, it becomes not so special. And that's one of my big bitches about that is that, we're seeing duplicity, too much duplicity, and the duplicity never results in winning the match, which should always be a wrestler's goal in this performance art scenario, is how do I create a match that shows the audience live and on television that I'm trying to win the match. And I think some of those moves have gone past being unique anymore. So I was more concerned about the guys because you knew that the Dudleys, the Edge and Christian, and the Hardys, especially the Hardys in their home state of North Carolina, they're going to do anything and everything possible to make this match spectacular. And they did steal the show. It was the hottest match on a very hot SummerSlam pay-per-view.
Well, it's super hot here. Meltzer would write, SummerSlam, after slower than expected event early, still sold out the Raleigh, North Carolina Entertainment and Sports Complex to the tune of 17,000, 2 folks in the building, 15,603 of them paid a $1,151,940 gate, as well as another nearly $148K in merchandise. Meltzer would classify it as the 7th highest live gate in the history of American pro wrestling and the first $1 million gate for an event other than a WrestleMania. This is fucking remarkable. And I don't know that a lot of people would even pinpoint that this is the show where the first $1 million gate happens outside of a WrestleMania, but this is really unreal success here.
Unreal. You're right. Unreal. It's, those are massive numbers on any generation. I mean, can you imagine in today's world, any company doing a $1.1 million live gate for an event? It's astonishing. But we had what they wanted to see. We had stars that were continuing to evolve. They had not got old. They had not got, well, I'm used to that. Or, there's no comfort zone yet in that scenario. You had one of the greatest stars, and it's proved to be, amazing as a success now. The Rock buying the XFL was a few weeks ago was kind of a surprise to me. But nothing he does really surprises me because he thinks things out. He's got a great team around him. We talked about Brian Gewirtz earlier. Brian Gewirtz is still one of Rock's right-hand men, works for $7 Entertainment. So that bond that was forged in the Attitude Era has lasted all these years. So it shows you how smart Rock is to surround himself with very bright and productive people. So it was an amazing accomplishment. And the crowd is something. There's something to be said about sitting at ringside and surrounded by 17,000 people. You feed off their energy, one does, as a broadcaster. At least I did. And that's why right now, we're doing the closed set thing in Daly's place in Jacksonville is challenging. It is challenging, but you start getting used to it a little bit. And instead of looking at the crowd, which is sporadic, sparse, to say the least, in a closed set like at Daly's place, you find yourself just watching the monitor more religiously because the monitor is focusing on what the fans at home are seeing. So your eyes should not wander. It should stay right on the monitor, especially all the time, quite frankly, but especially in these hours of closed sets and limited crowds. But it was amazing accomplishment. I remember we had, I'm trying to think, we had dinner the night before or after the show. Vince had a friend named, let me think of his name. Well, whatever. You're not going to know him anyway. And I don't remember his name. Nice guy. They went to military school together. He had a restaurant in Raleigh, a steakhouse, kind of like a Ruth Chris or a Morton's level, called Vinny's. And I remember having a great meal there at Vinny's. And ironically, to Bruce and my delight, it was next door to a strip club. Not that we went in, but just throwing a little color out there.
Hypothetically, it's a nice location, but yeah, it even gets a plug. Vinny's restaurant in Raleigh gets a free plug here on the show. And Meltzer would sort of freestyle, and maybe he has this right, that Vince McMahon is actually the inspiration for the restaurant being named Vinny's because he was involved in the original financing of the place. Can you confirm
That's true.
that?
Yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate. He helped his friend, helped his high school and his school buddy, and it was the right thing to do for Vince. He helped the guy get on his feet. And for a good while there, he had a very successful restaurant run. But I can just tell you from my own personal experience, it's no longer there. But man, oh man, it was delicious. It was one of those meals where you remember that meal from the road. That's one of the cool things about traveling so much, is you get you doing all you were doing stage shows and on the road, you always found a good place to eat.
Yeah,
and that was always a high spot, if pardon the pun, of a trip, at this restaurant or that restaurant, wherever it may be. So. It's like going to Indianapolis and eating at St. Elmo's, or going to New York City and eating variety, Peter Luger's or someplace. You remember those great meals that you had, and that was one of the great meals I can recall having, and that's been a long time ago. And as you can tell by looking at me, I've eaten since then.
Vince's go-to steakhouse in New York, though, it's not Peter Luger's. It's what's it called?
Smith and Walensky.
There you go, Smith and Walensky.
Mm-hmm. Been there many times. Smith and Walensky, after the Garden, they'd always keep it open, and we'd go over there. I remember one time we went there. I went to Major League Umpire School in 1976 with 121 other umpire prospects in St. Pete. And one of my buddies, my roommate there, is named Tim McClellan. And Tim McClellan has been immortalized on Sports Centers because he was the home plate umpire when the pine tar issue with George Brett. Remember that clip where he measured the plate and Brett had pine tar after I think he hit a home run or something. And they measured his bat. The pine tar exceeded the legal limitations, and so he was out. And then Brett comes running out of the dugout and confronts Tim. So that night, on this night at Smith & Walensky's, the umpire crew who'd done a Yankees game, they were all there. So we had a real nice night telling stories. Vince got a laugh out of all of it and hear the baseball stories and their own version of wrestling stories. So you remember certain things. Great meal at Smith & Walensky's. Great. I'm sure Bruce was probably there. Patterson was probably there. Vince and I. And then we ran into the umpires. Just little things like that really make these shows that you and I are doing fun for me because it brings back some happy memories of specific nights and specific places where you had some fellowship and you had some fun away from finishes and talent issues and so forth and so on. So pretty cool deal. You're right, though. Smith & Walensky's is Vince's go-to there. It was for years.
Let's talk about the first match on the show. We've got Right to Censor, which is Stevie Richards, Bull Buchanan, and the Good Father beating Too Cool, which is Scotty 2 Hottie and Grandmaster Sexay, and of course Rikishi. Meltzer would say not much to the match, goes 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Good Father threw down both hose. Scotty set up the worm on Bull Buchanan, but was cut off by a missed super kick by Stevie Richards and then pinned. He gives it 1 star. It's just sort of there for me. I didn't really enjoy the RTC gimmick, but man, you can't overstate how over Too Cool was in this era. What'd you think watching this one back for the first time in 20 years?
People love the dance. They love the entrance of Too Cool. They love to see Big Rikishi bust a move, as they say, as the kids say. And, two very white guys trying to dance, Scotty and Brian, but they got over. They really got over, and we probably could have done more with them, because if we had struck while the iron is hot, sometimes you're just in that pecking order where it's not your time yet, and there are other teams ahead of you type thing, that you miss the opportunity when the doors open. I said the same thing years ago about a match that Kofi Kingston had with Randy Orton from the Garden on Raw. At that point in time, Kofi Kingston was ready for great things, but they didn't come his way at that point in time. But to his credit, he steered the course, and those opportunities finally came around for him, including becoming the world champion. So, we could have probably done more with those guys, but the dancing got them over. The entrance was their money. And plus, let's don't take away from all three of those guys could work. They all had strong fundamental skills, right. So that helps.
Yes, it does. We should know it came out a couple of weeks ago that when you see the Right to Censor characters come out, it shows on the lower third their name, and these days it would show their Twitter handle. But back then, the company was experimenting with every individual talent having sort of their own website, and you would see underneath their names, even on the network now, it says righttocensor.com. I don't know if you've done this, Jim, but if you go to righttocensor.com, someone has picked up that domain and it now forwards to All Elite Wrestling.
Really?
It's pretty fun.
I did not know that.
Let's talk about the next match here. It's X-Pac and Road Dogg. They're going to go 4 minutes and 42 seconds. X-Pac gets the win, but Meltzer had this to say. This was the most disappointing match on the show, largely because the two are longtime friends and are both good workers capable of providing a hot match. Time was a limitation, but they even got boring chants, and little happened after X-Pac delivered a low kick and got the pin with the X Factor. After the match, X-Pac wanted to shake hands, but Road Dogg instead gave him a modified pump handle slam, 3/4 of a star. It does feel like a bit of a letdown. We've seen both of these guys have good matches. I don't know that Waltman's ever had a bad one, but this is probably disappointing for all involved here.
Yeah, they underachieved based on the time restraints. It wasn't a long time story arc that got us to SummerSlam with those guys. It was a hurried up angle because, as I said earlier, when we were just talking about the origins of this match, when you book it, You are firmly of the belief that two talents with the skill sets of Waltman and Road Dogg cannot have a bad match. Well, it didn't click that night. It just didn't click that night, and it was a little bit of a disappointment without a doubt. I thought it was going to be much better than it was, but the guys had effort. It just was not good storytelling leading into that match. It did not have. We didn't build the anticipation for it, and the result was the crowd was nonplussed.
Let's get to the next match here. This is a mixed tag. It's Eddie Guerrero and China on one side, Val Venus and Trish Stratus on the other. And the idea here is Val Venus is the Intercontinental Champion. Whoever scores the pin is going to become Intercontinental Champion. And unbelievably, it's China who gets the job done in 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Meltzer would write, China was really laying in everything on offense. She was wearing flat boots instead of the high heels, which makes her look shorter, but probably gave her a much better base to wrestle on. So she looked much better than normal. Guerrero is obviously one of the smoothest workers around. They kept Trish Stratus out until the finish. Obviously she doesn't have the training to be more than a slightly better version and more willing bump taker than most of the other quote unquote interchangeable women. China pressed her overhead and pinned her to capture the title, 2 stars. So the storyline here is Val Venus is going to lose the Intercontinental Championship, the second most important belt in the promotion. Val Venus loses this belt, not by being pinned, but by his female tag team partner being pinned by another female. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know, almost bastardization of the Intercontinental title. I mean, it's big on entertainment. China's over like Rover. It is time to push her to the moon, but I don't know about the way the Intercontinental Championship, easy for me to say, is just sort of thrown about here.
Yeah, it was a compromised booking in my view. We not fully committed to the intergender stuff, because if we had been committed, China would have got a roll up or small package or something on Val. And instead they went the other route. It did bastardize it somewhat in my view. And I don't know that there's been a certain point in time, and I'm not sure I could even tell you today who the Intercontinental Champion is in WWE. That the title has been devalued a great deal, which is unfortunate because of the tradition and its tenure. But we're between rock and a hard spot there. Triple H is really an advocate of China. Vince is listening to Triple H a lot, which is not a bad thing, actually. But it's just philosophically, it wasn't the fact that we became committed to intergender wrestling. It was the fact that we became committed to China and Joni's advancement as a talent. She when I would book her on the road, she always, it was ad nauseum. Don't book me with any women. I don't want to work with women. And I'm not going to work with women. So that's what pissed me off a little bit. Don't tell me who the fuck you're not going to work with. If I'm not smart enough to book you, then maybe you're in the wrong company. Or maybe I'm in the wrong company. But that whole deal, she was playing off her status, and Vince liked her. She was a bodybuilder. She lifted heavy weights, all the stuff that he liked with men. Why would he like it with women?
Right.
And she was very unique. There's no doubt about it. She was very talented, but it was we're in that no man's land. Are we going to go there or not? On that night, this night here at SummerSlam 2000, we decided not to go there, but soon thereafter, there's where you were.
Next up, it's the Jerry Lawler Taz match. 4 minutes and 24 seconds. Lawler gets the win. Meltzer gives it a 1.25 stars. He writes, the crowd was very into Lawler, who still at age 50 came off the top rope with his fist drop and did his trademark moves. After Taz no-sold a pile driver and a ref bump, Taz got the choke, but Lawler makes the ropes. When Taz wouldn't break it, Jim Ross got off his chair and smashed a glass jar of candy on Taz's head. Taz, who's only gotten the color a few times in his career, bled, as did JR's hand from the breaking of the glass. Lawler scored the pin on a gigantic pop. It was kept short, and the people got what they wanted out of it. So what's the deal here? I mean, obviously, you didn't historically have a big candy jar on your desk. You did this night. They managed to get a few shots of it. It comes into play here, and for everybody to be bleeding here, it feels like once again not sugar glass, not gimmicks glass. What's up with this? What do you remember?
Well, I think it was gimmick glass. They said handle it very, very. I know when I picked the glass, the candy jar off the announce table, and went to do the spot, I was very tentative with it because they said it could very easily break and disintegrate, so to speak. So, but there was enough real glass in that presentation that it got. I cut my hand, so I'm bleeding like a goddamn hog here for nothing. And it wasn't planned. I mean, it wasn't planned. Let's have JR cut his hand. That was not planned. It was an accident because of the stunt and the material that we were using. So there's where that was. It's just, I was just hoping that this is it. Can we just move on? But here's what killed me all the time in this deal. And maybe we look at it and say, well, that's why it was happening. The minute by minute ratings influence everybody in a different way. It can be a career maker or career killer. In my case, more often than not, the minute by minutes when good old JR got in jeopardy or in trouble or in the deep water, the fans had an emotional investment in that character and good old JR, and they stayed tuned. And therefore, the minute by minute ratings reflected that. So that was, so you put a talent out there and they wouldn't draw those kind of ratings. Some talents, not all, some talents didn't draw those minute by minute successes. So that's what we were looking for is ratings. So I think that's why my fat ass was thrown into the deep water more often than not, was because people gave a shit about the character in the black hat, and consequently they stayed tuned, and that was the goal. So I was just hoping that when we did that thing, let's just move on. Can we just not move on? And I'd already dodged bullets. I'd already got glass in my eye. Now I cut my hand. This shit ain't working. But the finish was good. Lawler got a great pop. They compliment Taz for that as well. He was a guy that was outside of New York City, was easy to boo. He was a man that was always angry, much like today. He was always a very volatile and controversial. So I'll say this: Taz's promo work on AEW in recent weeks has been the highlight of his little faction. His work has been extraordinarily good at cutting a promo. So, I think that's a testament to his ability to be a heel. He's a natural born heel, is Taz. And so I just hope that let's just close this chapter, man, and move on. Can we just do that? So, but in any event, it got both of them bookings. You got both of them extra paydays. You make a nice payday when you draw $1.1 million at the gate, plus a pay-per-view audience.
Yes, you do. Let's get to the next match. This is the spectacle that everyone still remembers. Steve Blackman is going to regain the hardcore title, pinning Shane McMahon in 10 minutes and 8 seconds. Meltzer says the match was nothing special until the stuntman finish. Blackman did a garbage can on McMahon's head and dented it up with fighting sticks. Test and Albert do a run-in with Test using the elbow drop off the top of the garbage can lid. The finish would see McMahon climb a ladder at the set with Blackman behind him. Blackman hits him with a cane, and McMahon would fall backwards some 30 feet onto what appeared to be a crash pad in a garbage bin. Lawler and Ross were saying they were hovering between 50 and 75 feet as their estimate of the fall. Blackman climbs down a little and then from about 10 feet flies off with an elbow drop onto McMahon in the garbage bin for the pin. McMahon, of course, does the stretcher job afterwards. And this was used as storyline as Stephanie was understandably freaked out about her brother's injury. And later when Kurt Angle walked in, showed no concern at all. 2.25 stars. What'd you think?
Well, we embellished the 50 to 70 feet thing. I think we might've been told to say that, quite frankly. It was designed, the match was designed for one thing, and that was that stunt.
Right.
Shane had limited skills at that point in time. He was getting his feet on the ground for bell-to-bell stuff. And Blackman was, a guy that we believed was believable and deserved the opportunity to see if he could move up the card. His MMA and his skill set was unique. Steve looked great. So, he was It was a one-trick pony finish. Nothing that they did in the match or could have done in the match was ever going to overproduce or take the spotlight away from Shane's bump at the end of the match. Everything was built around that bump, and for that, you looking at it in that rationale, then they got what they wanted out of the match.
Why do you think Blackman never got over more than he did? It feels like he should have been a bigger star than ever on the heels of this, but it doesn't really happen. He's obviously got a legitimate background. Fans believe him. They believe he's a badass. And then we see, a big win like this on a featured spot. I mean, this bump is obviously going to get Shane a bunch of attention, but the guy who quote unquote made him do it. I mean, it just feels like Blackman should have been a much bigger star on the heels of this.
I think Steve had a bigger personality backstage and with the boys than he did on television. I think it's that simple. Personality. Steve was kind of an introverted guy. He was a very unique guy. And I don't think that his personality came through the television as much as we would have liked, and sure as much as Steve would have liked. Now, Steve may say, well, if I had more chances, I could have done better. And he may be right. But I would say if you're asking a direct question, my direct answer would be probably a lack of marketable charisma and the way that Steve was presented, which always gives you the caveat to say, well, if his presentation had been better, he would have gotten over more. And that holds true with a lot of illustrations, a lot of talent. But I think the personality side, it's a lot like Brad Armstrong. Brad Armstrong was as good fundamentally as anybody that I've ever been around in wrestling. He could make any match better. He could work with anybody. He could work as a babyface or a heel, with a mask, without a mask, whatever. But his personality, when the light was on, was not equal to his personality in the locker room or backstage or whatever. One of the most likable, entertaining, funny guys I've ever been around. But for whatever reason, he didn't connect to the audience personality-wise, much like his younger brother, the Road Dogg. They raised in the same family, the great Bullet Bob Armstrong, one of the greatest of all time, Hall of Famer. It's just people are different. And Brad didn't have that personality on screen that he needed to have to match his work on screen. So I think Blackman was cut out of the same pattern there.
Next up, we've got a 2 out of 3 falls match with Benoit and Jericho. And when you hear that, you probably assume, like I would, well, this is, more than a half hour. It's actually less than a half hour, 13 minutes and 2 seconds. Benoit gets the win. And Meltzer were right. Of course, it was a good match, but something was missing, and it seemed rushed. They may have been given longer. First fall saw Benoit win in 3 minutes and 15 seconds with a crossface. That is awfully fast. The second fall with Jericho came back with a nice roll through the walls of Jericho at 5 minutes and 10 seconds. And the third fall saw them deliver big moves, including a dragon suplex by Benoit and a super Frankensteiner by Jericho off the top rope, as well as the lion salt. Jericho selling his shoulder for much of this last fall, and it seemed to be building well, and then abruptly ended with Jericho going for a cradle and Benoit reversing it while holding the ropes for the pin at 4 minutes and 37 seconds of the final fall. 3 1/4 stars. The work was good, but I do tend to agree with Meltzer that I just assumed this would have been a longer match. Do you think they had time cut, or was this probably the original plan and just all that Vince saw for them on the show?
My sense would say that somewhere along the way, the show got heavy, and they may have gotten some time cut. But the other side of that answer would be maybe the show was overwritten. Maybe there was too much. And perhaps, instead of timing the show, you want to protect the main event. So if you get heavy in the middle of the show, somebody's got to pay the price of getting their time cut so you can make sure you protect the main event that sold the show. And I think that might be it. The show might have been overwritten, too much content for the amount of time that they had. But I thought it was I enjoyed the match. I enjoyed the pace, but could it have been longer? Of course it could have been longer, but that's not the way it fell. But I just believe that those guys did a hell of a job based on the fact that their time was shorter than they would ideally wanted for a 3-fall match. For a 1-fall match, the time they had was fine. For a 3-fall match, telling 3 chapters, telling 3 stories in this 3-chapter book, too quick. It was a quick read. It should have been a little bit longer read. Yeah, it was just timing issues. I don't think it had anything to do with the talent. I think it had everything to do with the time that they had to do their work.
Go out of your way to watch the next one. It's Edge and Christian retaining their titles, their tag team championship in a 3-way. It's tables, ladders, and chairs. Oh my. Over the Dudleys and of course the Hardy Boys. They go 14 minutes, 51 seconds. Meltzer would say this was no doubt going to get a lot of match of the year votes. He says it has all kinds of sensational spots. And believe it or not, Jeff Hardy actually goes into the match with a bad ankle. 4.5 stars. Man, I don't know that we could ever properly do this match justice. It's one of those, you got to see it to believe it. This is a series of home runs from this series of tag teams here. I mean, these guys are going to be bona fide stars on the other edge of this, but nobody's ever seen anything like it. My sense tells me that at the time you were probably down on all the high risk, thinking that, hey, this is going to cut everybody's career short. Maybe we save it for a big pay-per-view, or maybe we don't do it at all. What was your thinking about this type of spectacle at the time, and has it changed over time?
Well, again, the precedent of a TLC match with 3 teams had not been perfected. It had not been overplayed. It was new. So trying to imagine beforehand what these guys were going to do in this match was next to impossible. Because, quite frankly, they overachieved to the most amazing levels that I can remember ever. Again, it was a match that was new, fresh. You had 3 teams that were very talented and very hungry. They all realized that they were in a position on a major show to be extraordinary and make lasting memories. Now, again, as I said earlier, when we just started talking about this, none of us realized that this TLC match was going to spawn a brand. Because again, what do you base it on? So the only thing you worry about in those scenarios is, are they willing to take too much risk, and where the risk reward factor is out of proportion? The one thing as the head of talent relations, and managing these guys, paying these guys, doing the contracts, et cetera, is that you didn't want to lose them. They're not going to make you any money if they're on the injured reserve list. So my concerns were, I hope they come out of this son of a bitch healthy, and luckily, knock on wood, as I'm knocking now, they did that. But as Meltzer alluded to, it's obvious that they're going to be sore, because you don't learn to do what these guys did in a wrestling school. I mean, they went to a whole different level. So I was proud of those guys, a lot proud of them. And but again, it was I saw things in that match that I'd never seen before. And for a guy like Lawler and myself to have to see things in a wrestling match that we had never dreamed that we'd be seeing was pretty damn special. So I'd like to think we did that match a good service. I think we called the hell out of it, because we were marks, as they use that term. We at least I was. I freaked out. I thought it was just absolutely one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen in pro wrestling, and I still believe that. And I'm glad that and look how it's worked out for everybody. Jeff Hardy's still around, got a spot. Matt Hardy's in AEW, and I'm sure bigger and better things are on the way for Matt. Edge, Hall of Fame, returned this year, still going. Think of this a long time ago, Conrad, 20 years. And, the Dudleys, Bubba's doing a great job on Busted Open Radio with Dave LaGreca on Sirius XM. Devon's got a job as a producer for WWE. Everybody has found their spot. Even Christian came back with that Randy Orton bit here not too long ago. They were a great team. Edge is in the Hall of Fame. I'm sure Christian will be in the Hall of Fame. I'm somewhat sure he'll be in the Hall of Fame someday. I don't know about the Hardys. They should be. I don't know why they wouldn't be. If it's only because Matt's with AEW, and that doesn't displace the fact that he and his brother deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. That'd be my take on that deal. But I'd never seen anything like it. And I can only tell you that there are only a few things the matches I've called where I can say, well, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see Rock and Hogan the way it played out coming. I didn't see the double turn working as well as it did at WrestleMania 13 with Austin and Brett. And I look back at those times, Connie, and I say, goddamn, JR, you're a lucky son of a bitch, man, because you're a wrestling fan. You still are, but you got to be at the right place at the right time to call some of the most significant matches involving some extraordinary talents. And again, I had a double-edged sword interest in it. I was interested in it as a broadcaster and making it better and adding the lyric to their music that would be fitting. And then also as an administrator, you don't want these guys getting so crazy about getting over and doing these crazy spots that they put themselves in a position where there's a small window for success. I didn't want to close their window of success by doing things that really and truly you can't survive and stay in one piece. So it was a magnificent night for me in that regard, and I'll always remember that match as one of the most significant matches I've called. Recently there was somebody written a few weeks ago about the date that Ron Simmons became the first Black World Champion,
right?
Beating Vader in Baltimore. Well, I didn't realize at that time how significant that was. You're working hard, you getting all your work done, you're multitasking, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I knew that his time was coming and all that. But little did I realize, to my own chagrin today, how big a match that was for a black man in the world of Black Lives Matter that became the recognized world champion to a national organization. So it's just funny how those things work out. You remember certain things. But that TLC match was one that I'll never forget. And if you're going to go back and watch this show, which I encourage you to do as a fan, but if you're only going to watch one thing, Conrad, what your thoughts are, I'd watch the TLC match.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a spectacle unlike anything you've ever seen. And so is the next match, but maybe in a different way. Cat and Terry are going to go 3 minutes and 6 seconds in a thong stink face match. Yep. This is real. Al Snow is out here, and so is Perry Saturn in their respective corners. Well, I don't know what to say here.
Well, it was booked for your exact reaction right now. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be a wrestling match. It'll get the Meltzer's dud. He could have rated that before they did it.
Sure.
Because it's not going to live up to his standards. It was booked to be an attraction. It was booked to have a little comedy. My God, you got two of the more entertaining guys in the business on the outside, and Al Snow, who's doing a hell of a job there at OVW nowadays there in Louisville, and Perry Saturn, funny guy, great personality. The mop thing, the whole 9 yards he ended up doing. So it was set up to do for two untrained women who had not had formal pro wrestling training to get through a presentation on a major show and following one of the most sensational presentations in the history of the business. And I say that's a big statement, but look again who it helped cultivate and spawn and advance the careers I just mentioned a few moments ago. And it created a brand. So there's not a talent or a match on the roster that could have followed a TLC match. And unfortunately, it was the ladies were put there for that comedy match because it didn't have to follow. There's see those guys calling me back right now, Conrad. I'm not going to buy nothing from you son of a bitches. And you get a recorded message. They say that if you answer, they know they have a hotline, they have a live line. So I never answer. So if any of you creditors, I don't have any creditors. If any of you sellers are listing, I ain't answered your goddamn phone call. How's that for you, bastards?
And by the way, if you get tired of the goddamn ads on this show, join us over at adfreeshows.com. You get all these shows early and ad free. And a very special bonus this month, Jim, we're doing JR Fires Back. I'm going to play you shoot interview clips from people who have shit on you over the years and let you respond to them. This should be
that'll
fun.
be edifying. You just trying to piss me off?
Yeah, everybody loves Red Ass JR. Red Ass JR is best for business.
Okay. Well, well, goddamn sure give them their money's worth, because I'm sure that being in the position I was in, you can't make everybody happy. You just can't. And also, let's call a spade here. They may have good points. Well, they may. What the hell? They got an opinion and a take, and my ego's not so out of control that I can't handle criticism. You got to remember, I worked for Vince McMahon for 26 years.
Right.
You think what some fucker's comments online is going to run up my ass? I don't think so. I don't. But it'll be a fun show, and I'm sure, because I don't read that stuff, I'll be hearing it for the first time from my dear friend Conrad, and we'll react accordingly. I can promise you. But anyway, I didn't I like the I didn't have a problem with the ladies, Stacy and Terry. They had been trained. They're put in a tough situation. Can you imagine walking out there with very little refined skill set after seeing that TLC match? Because they were standing at Gorilla when in the Gorilla position area when that TLC match was ongoing, and the ballyhoo at the Gorilla position, people were oohing and awing and jumping up and down and clapping their hands and all that stuff. And now they're looking at each other like, and we got to follow this thing and look what we're wearing. And so I admire what they did, quite frankly. Dud or no dud, who cares about the match? I cared about the match. It got two talents a nice payday. It got Al Snow and Perry Saturn on TV. They earned some extra money that day. So I look at it a lot of different ways than saying, what was the match quality? Are you shitting me? What was the match quality? It was a dud. Move on. Let's just move on. Jesus.
Next up, Undertaker goes to a no contest with Kane, 6 minutes, 28 seconds. Meltzer's write-up is, they brawled. Undertaker threw the steps at Kane, who juiced. Match had no heat until Undertaker started going for the mask. Finally, Undertaker unmasked Kane, whose face was covered by his hair and some blood. He got out of the ring, and Undertaker's music played. The story was that since the bell never rang, there didn't have to be a winner and a loser. Half a star. This is just, obviously these are two of your biggest stars, and it's a nice way to get them on the pay-per-view. But with Big Show out, this is what they go with. If Big Show would have been game day ready, what would have happened here instead? Do you recall?
No, not really. Can't see the faith in Big Show at that time would have been massive to beat Taker, for example. So I don't really know how that would have worked out. I think that Taker and Kane had several versions of matches. So we didn't do them a great service in get them ready for this confrontation. Quite frankly, and luckily they're both such great team players. They went along with it and did what they could do in 6 minutes and change. So it wasn't ideal for either guy creatively, but they did the best they could with what they had to work with. Much like we're talking about the rationale between Jericho and Benoit in that 2 out of 3 fall match. I think this match too was a victim of timing. They cut the girls thing was 3 minutes. So then you got, so there's no time, not a lot, about as quick as they could do it. And then you had 6 minutes and change for Taker and Kane. And I just believe that was just another offshoot of something got heavy earlier in the night. And again, you got to protect the time that you committed to your main event. So that was how I look at that situation. It wasn't the greatest presentation by us on how we presented Taker and Kane.
Let's get to our main event, and it's a doozy. It's a 3-way. It's The Rock retaining his WWF title over Kurt Angle and Triple H in 20 minutes and 9 seconds. It actually goes longer because Angle cuts a promo saying that he satisfied Stephanie more than Triple H ever could. That leads to them brawling for 3 or 4 minutes before the match actually starts. And Meltzer would write, the brawl was supposed to end with Triple H giving Angle a pedigree on the Spanish announce table, which would break and take Angle out of the match for 15 minutes. All of that did happen, except the table broke early and Angle wound up taking a very bad bump and was knocked for a loop. Angle was taken to the back, and Triple H and Rock did a typical good match for 15 minutes. Eventually, we see Angle jump off the stretcher and hit the ring. Triple H hits the pedigree, but Angle pulls Triple H off for the pin, and then he tries to jump on the Rock to steal the pin and the title, but Rock kicks out. Rock nails a DDT for a near fall, then a Rock bottom, but Triple H makes the save for Kurt Angle, but mainly for himself. And then Triple H tells Stephanie to throw him the sledgehammer. She throws it in the middle, and Triple H gets it before Angle, so Angle kicks Triple H in the face. Triple H goes to hit Rock, who moves and knocks out Stephanie instead. Angle then hits Triple H with the sledgehammer, but Rock throws Angle out of the ring and gives Triple H the people's elbow for the pin. And the show ends with Angle carrying a limp Stephanie to the back, 3 3/4 stars. So we've got a lot of great action here, but we're also still doubling down on the story here at SummerSlam with Angle carrying Stephanie to the back. But a pretty scary spot early on with this whole table spot with Kurt Angle. Meltzer would even say Angle's eyes were glazed over after landing wrong at the Spanish announce table broke before Triple H had fully executed the pedigree on him. While most of the main points of the storyline continued, Angle was taken to the hospital after the show and held overnight for observation. The CAT scan came back negative for checking on a concussion from the information we were given, but on TV they pushed the idea that he was suffering from a concussion and memory loss. Backstage after the match, but before going to the hospital, it was said that Angle couldn't remember anything that took place in the match after his head hit the floor when the table broke, causing him to land wrong. You had a bird's eye view for all this. How nervous were you when you saw the bad bump that Angle took right at the beginning of the match?
Scary as hell. It was scary as hell. It's one of those deals where you can see a cut. You can see a broken bone sometimes, or a displacement, things of that nature. But when you're dealing with the brain, you can't see how much damage was actually done, and you will never know until the CAT scans and other medical procedures are put into place. But anybody that's, Lawler and I are sitting right there next door. It's in our neighborhood. So it was scary as hell because you saw how Kurt landed, and even though he's got that huge neck, and which saved his ass a bunch of times, I can promise you. But you didn't know how bad he was injured, and neither did anyone else. Luckily, the storyline was him to be gone for a while and then make his comeback to the match and in the ring and so forth. But it was scary because he's not the kind of guy that's going to turn away. He's a warrior. He's a battler, is Kurt. Still is. He's very competitive. And again, we mentioned this about Lesnar earlier at OVW. That's what you get when you get mainstream athletes that come from have a successful pedigree. They're normally very, very competitive, and they push themselves to limits that others might not to prove that they are the alpha male in any formula, in any scenario. So yeah, I was scared as hell because again, you go to different. We wear a different hat, so to speak. The good old JR calling the match, blah blah blah, and doing his job was one area. But then you're wondering, okay, now how long? We just lost Austin. Austin, even though Austin's getting ready to come back, he's not back. And so then Angle's on this upward movement, and now he could be out. So those things engulf my thoughts. The humanity for a talent being injured and being displaced from TV is one thing. But the other thing is the long-term effect of having a concussion situation is something that never goes away in this business. So, I say the thing about we had Darby Allin get a concussion several weeks ago on AEW, and you just wonder how a guy like Darby, who's working his ass off to get over and become one of our most popular stars, but I don't want him to become concussion prone.
Right.
And the way that Darby wrestles so spectacularly in a young Jeff Hardy-like fashion, Darby takes lots of risk. So Kurt would take a lot of risk, and we've seen that time and time again. So, but you worry about brain injuries because again, you can't see it. You don't see the bruising. You don't see this or that, the blood, the wound, whatever. And so it's always that fear of the unknown. And then, I always try to manage worst case scenario. Okay, so I'm probably thinking at ringside as we go off the air, okay, so Kurt's going to be out for a while. And that means I've got to go back and look at all the live events and rebook all these cards, which got to be a pain in the ass, but it's part of the job. But again, the unknown was troublesome, and it was nasty. It was a nasty bump, and it was an accident. The table was very unforgiving. Didn't cooperate. Somebody forgot to tell the table to finish.
I love you for that. This pay-per-view wound up getting 570,000 buys, down from 1999, 600,000 buys, and way down from Undertaker Stone Cold Highway to Hell in 1998. That did 700,000 buys. So even though it feels like it's trending down from 798 to 699, we do 570 here in 2000 without Stone Cold Steve Austin, but it's years. I think it's like 05 before we would beat this number of buys again. How badly were you guys missing Stone Cold in this era business wise? Because when I hear biggest gate for a non-WrestleMania, 1.1, it's sold out. Creatively, the show is very good. The roster is loaded for bear. It doesn't feel like you're missing him, but then when you see the buy rate and it being down year over year, it starts to feel like, man, mainstream is missing their Stone Cold. They need their fix.
Yeah, it'd be like when Tom Brady played for the Patriots and he's not available. The game changes. You can still win. You can still come up with a great game plan, play great defense, special teams, get a quarterback in there that's not going to beat you, but it's not the same. And I think that's kind of a rough analogy to this scenario. Steve when he went out with the injury, he was the hottest star ever in wrestling. He was selling more pay-per-views, more tickets, more merchandise, better ratings. His minute by minutes were scary good. So it was. We missed him a lot, but you had less remorse in missing him because you did have The Rock. You did have a evolving villain in Triple H who was doing a great job as a bad guy. You had Kurt Angle who was starting to come into his own if you keep him healthy, and then you have these 6 stars that almost made themselves in the TLC match. You still had Chris Benoit looking for his foothold. You had great Chris Jericho, who I still say is the MVP of AEW for a lot of reasons. So, but we had backup. We had a good bench. We had a good team. We had a good roster. But you can't replace a Stone Cold. You just can't. And it's not knocking anybody. Well, he's saying that he's better than The Rock. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that Austin got over more than anybody else, including Hogan, including The Rock, and everybody to that point. Now, Rock certainly got over big time in WWE, enough that Hollywood noticed, and now he's, one of the most influential guys in the country in entertainment. I'm still anxious to see what he's going to do with the XFL, but that's a story that we could stay tuned for. So, but Austin was missed, man. Austin was missed, not unlike Patriots missing Brady, and I think we'll see that this year as well, that all those guys opting out to play this year. Well, that's a strange thing about football. The guys are saying, I don't want to play because of the virus. Every son of a bitch in my life that is this late on a deadline has blamed the virus. It's the convenient excuse in our life today when somebody doesn't fulfill their obligation. Well, that damn virus has got everything slowed down. To that I say bullshit. Sure it does. But you got to find solutions to these seemingly unattainable problems. They're not unattainable. Just be honest with somebody. I'm pissed off. I got furniture ordered from my condo in Jacksonville Beach. That's, you find it, well, we didn't know the factory was closed down. Well, okay, I get that. But, maybe we should have found some furniture that was in stock, i.e. on somebody's showroom floor, and get that. So the virus thing is it's a pain in the ass in so many ways in real life, deaths and so forth. Much more important than JR's fucking furniture. I get that too, but the virus is it's a convenient excuse for a lot of people, not for everybody. And I'm not downplaying the virus, but that's what everybody's leaning on right now. I don't know how I got there, the statement, but nonetheless, I vacillated into another area of one of my pet peeves, and so I apologize for that.
Let's talk about SummerSlam. This is the fifth highest or fifth most purchased SummerSlam on pay-per-view. And I think most fans hold this show in high regard. Overall, what say you? Where does this one rank all time? And is it a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
Oh, a thumbs up without a doubt. And again, because of the ladder match being so spectacular, being fresh and new, you can see the hunger on the face, the sparkle in the eye of these three teams finally getting a chance to prove what they always believed they had, and that was main event level abilities. And they could create a match of their own. It wasn't a Texas death match. It wasn't a tornado match. It wasn't anything that had all the other matches that we can name that had been done and done and done. It was brand new, and they had a blank canvas of which to do their painting. The canvas in the ring was one thing. The canvas in the theater of the mind was another. So that match alone will always rank this SummerSlam as probably, I can't think of one off the top of my head that has impressed me more. I thought it was a good card, good show, the storytelling leading up to the main event. And again, you see how cutting back on time because the show was overbooked, had too much content that they saved, and they were able to get that 20 minutes plus for the last piece of business that we did, which was the main event. So some people had to pay the price, 2 out of 3 fall match, et cetera, but I thought it was a hell of a show. The crowd was amazing. It's so important to have that big crowd there and so boisterous and emotionally invested. And I tell you, I don't know this very day, Conrad, that you go back and look at that thing again, which I do, as I mentioned, encourage folks to check it out. That match is about 15 minutes. So take 15 minutes out of your day, go on and find that match in YouTube or WWE Network, wherever it may be, and enjoy it. But I just thought that match alone made this show extraordinarily special to me. And I'm sure we'll do other SummerSlams going forward that I'll think of something else that was a good show too. But right now we're talking about 2000. And the match that stood out and stole the show was the ladder match. And I'll always remember, and I'm grateful I got to call it.
It's a big deal. I too would rank this near the top of my list of favorite SummerSlams. You know, I like the old school stuff when I was first watching wrestling, probably 89, maybe a little better just because of nostalgia. But when you actually look at the card and what all's going on here, this has got to be near the top of everyone's list. The only shows that had more buys than this were 89, 99, 2000. And then 5 years later, believe it or not, Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan on top would beat this as far as number of buys. So I think top 5 is an easy thing for us to all agree on, that this show qualifies. And it's happening when Stone Cold's at the top and he's not on this card because of his injury. So it's pretty remarkable that you can have a great all-time pay-per-view like that without your biggest star. Next week, we'll be back doing something totally different. Of course, we're easing out of August. We're easing into September here. And we're going to revisit Clash of the Champions number 3. And I have so much fun talking about the old school days with you. I'm sure this will be no exception. Clash of the Champions 3 went down September 7th, 1988 at the Albany Civic Center in Albany, Georgia. There's about 3,700 fans in attendance. It got a 5.4 rating on TBS. And coincidentally, this Clash of the Champions is sort of subtitled, or easy for me to say, Fall Brawl is the gimmick name of this one. We had nice catchphrases or slogans or taglines for all of them. Fall Brawl would go on to be an annual pay-per-view, but this is the very first one. It's Mike Rotunda taking on Brad Armstrong. Nikita Koloff are going to take on, Jesus, I got to clean this up. Nikita Koloff and Steve Williams take on the Sheepherders. Dusty Rhodes takes on Kevin Sullivan. Ricky Morton is working with Ivan Koloff. And on top for the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, it's Sting and Barry Windham. This was an interesting time in WCW because, well, there's a bit of a transition. The winds of change are here between Jim Crockett Promotions and Turner. What do you remember about this particular show, which I believe had San Francisco 49er John Ayers involved?
Yeah, John Ayers was a friend of Dusty's. John played offensive guard for the 49ers and some of their Super Bowl teams. He was the commissioner. At one time, he was the commissioner, I think, of the UWF or something like that, in that role. Really a nice guy. Really a nice guy. I think John died of cancer. Big, rugged, raw bone guy from West Texas. So he and Dusty had a lot of Texas stuff in common and football in common. John's really a super guy. So we'll talk more about John Ayers. The thing about this show that the card that you talked about, no flair. Nope, right?
No flair. You're exactly right.
So we talked about no Austin at SummerSlam 2000 that we just did. No flair in Albany, Georgia. So that was always going into that. Well, how are we going to do ratings-wise without an H?
Right.
Because so much had been built around him, and he was such identifiable as the star that he was and still is. How's that going to be for us? So, but it was an interesting show. I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it, because these shows, once we go back and do our research and our homework, we discover lost backstories.
Right.
And I think those are always interesting for the fans, and we try to share those stories with them. So it should be good. So next week and every Thursday, unless you're on the ad-free component of what we do, it'll be fun to talk about. I'm looking forward to it. All those Clash of Champions had their own personality, their own point in time in history where things were unique. And one of the things that were unique about this was the fact that, Luger was getting a big push, the goddamn push, baby. Conrad, I signed just yesterday. We still have that offer on my website, jrsbbq.com, where you can order under the black hat. If you live in the continental United States, I'll pay for the shipping, the postage, whatever you want to say. And then we will inscribe what the audience or the fan, the buyer, wants in the book. Now, some of them want it for Happy Birthday, Uncle Billy. Some of them want to, whatever. The one that is yesterday, I couldn't believe. People wanted me to say in their book, to Conrad, here's your goddamn push.
Yeah.
The push has become, it's part of the vernacular now in a kind of a humorous way, but we're still doing that at our website. So if you're interested in a book for a birthday gift or anniversary, or if the wrestling fan in your family, or you want to, get somebody that's hard to buy for, we'll put in the book. I don't write in F-bombs. Sorry, but because I don't know who else is going to be seeing this book.
Right.
And I'm signing it. It's not a fake signature. It's me doing it. So I would have no excuse. So the F-bombs are omitted, but nonetheless, it's a cool offer. We're going to continue it as long as there's an interest in buying the book, and there's a lot of interest in the book, and within the publishing world and within the other components where people are very interested in this book becoming something more than just a book. So we'll keep everybody posted on that deal. Fingers are crossed on that project, by the way. They're always long shots, but you never know. You never say never. So my granny said one time, I told her I wanted to be the voice of the St. Louis Cardinals, sitting at the supper table. My dad laughing, almost doing a spit take with his tea. My grandfather's grunting. And my granny saw that whole deal. She says, well, Jimmy, long before JR, Jimmy, somebody's going to do it. Why not you? And I've had that philosophy my entire life. Somebody's going to do this job. Somebody's going to call this match. Why not me? So that's kind of how I look at that scenario. The Clashes all had a different story, different background, and we'll get into some of that stuff next week. Should be fun, quite frankly.
Don't you dare miss it. Clash of Champions number 3. I can't wait to talk about how this is really becoming the Sting show. He headlined the first Clash of the Champions against Ric Flair. He's back in the main event, teaming up with Dusty Rhodes in the second one. And here for the third one, what do you know? Sting's in the main event. This is the anointing of Sting here in 1988. There's so much to unpack. We'll be back next week with that. And don't forget, as Jim said, you can get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. And don't forget, we've got something awesome coming there. Red Ass JR. JR fires back. You don't want to miss that over at adfreeshows.com. Don't forget to pick up the new book. And of course, all the great sauce and seasoning. It feels like it's grilling season. jrsbbq.com is busier than ever, and they've got some great deals for you. And as always, enjoy Jim on the call every single Wednesday. It's on TNT. It's Dynamite for AEW. It's Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. He is at JR's BBQ on Twitter. I am at Hey It's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you next week right here on Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Heavy on the misser, by God.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.